There was once an old man who lived in a humble countryside village. He and his nephew, Minato, made their way through the house carrying trays. Minato placed the houseplants on the designated shelf. Then his grandfather handed him the sweets before putting them on the same shelf. That caught a little girl's attention. Little Minato climbed down the stepping stool and joined his grandfather in silent prayer. Suddenly, he heard a chime sound behind him. When he turned back to the shelf, the sweets were gone. The girl snatched the sweets and smiled at them before vanishing into thin air. Naturally, this unveiling of events would make any little rascal scared shitless, so he clung to his grandpa. But oddly though, the old man was happy. If that was my old man, he would have said goodbye to his family jewels, for I would think he was possessed. Thankfully, that was not the case with this geezer. He was just glad that his boy could see spirits, the good ones to be specific. That little girl was a Zashiki Warashi, a house spirit, and had been living in this house long before the old man moved in. Fast forward several years, and we are at a bus station, where a grown-up Minato arrives in a small valley village. Using a little paper with a hand-drawn map, our boy makes his way to the destination. Minato found himself cutting through one of the village's many rice fields, while kids ran past him while playing together. The scene was quite nice and peaceful. Down the scenic path, a grandma resting near a Jizo shrine greeted the new blood to the hood. Minato shyly greeted her back. A man wearing a black suit was talking on his phone when Minato passed by. He hadn't seen his face around here before, but soon the man's attention was drawn to someone calling him over to the nearby decrepit home. Minato finally made it to his destination. The house's front gate seemed to ooze a dark aura over its walls. Minato rubbed his eyes, thinking it was some haze clouding his vision. Then, while holding the map, he whipped out the key to open the gate. As soon as the key and gate made contact, a shock went through his body. The dark aura consuming the house dispersed as the drawings on the map became less visible. As a logical young adult, Minato thought the phenomenon was static electricity. Yet, it doesn't explain why the drawing on the paper lightens. It must have been the wind, I tell you. Well, it's not, but it's a perfect way to segue. A strong gust of wind swept the paper out of his hand and towards the mountains. The paper flew down near a sacred tree and touched a shrine consumed by the same vile aura. The aura once again dispersed immediately. Whatever was left of the drawings on the paper completely vanished. Within the small shrine, an eye opened. Soon after, Minato sets his boxes inside the house and opens the back door. A large, overgrown garden greets him. The main man liked what he saw until he realized how many chores awaited him. He pulled out a bunch of sticky notes and started writing down everything that he needed to do, and then pinned them on the fridge. His mom called to check up, and of course, as mothers do, she made sure to remind him to eat. He assures her he is no longer a child and that he is doing well. That being said, his life as a house caretaker starts now. First, he unpacked all the boxes, then vacuumed the premises, and took care of the bathroom. Long story short, the house was factory new after he was done. Speaking of which, his father's distant relative built this house for their retirement, but they passed away before they could see that day. Man, passing away before getting to enjoy the fruits of your labor must be the saddest shit ever. And I wonder if you know what it means to find your dreams. And I wonder, why did no one buy such a nice house? His mom said that although several people came to see it, they all declined without giving a clear reason. While talking on the phone, the dark aura seeped back into the house. As soon as the aura made contact with the sticky notes, it vanished, and with it, most of the writings on them. However, the main man did notice as he was thinking about the garden and when the gardener would come. Minato then noticed flowers laid out on the garden's porch. He grabbed the flowers and looked around. He felt a presence in one of the bushes. And correct he was. The animal visage within it vanished into darkness. The next day, Minato sat down with the gardener after he finished clearing the garden. While chatting, Minato expressed his desire to avoid planting anything in the empty garden since he'd only be there temporarily. Suddenly, the dark aura appeared on the gardener's shoulder, eliciting a painful reaction. Subsequently, he complained of shoulder problems that have stuck with him for a while now. Then the wind acted up, as it does do, which ultimately blew through the house, ripping a page from Minato's memo book. The page flew onto the gardener's aching shoulder. Suddenly, the gardener got up and started spinning his arm like it was brand new. The pain vanished, and with it, the text on the paper. Minato stared at the paper in confusion, but as usual, another insignificant thing, like plants on his porch, stole his attention, which the gardener didn't place there. Yup, another gift without a trace of the giver. The next morning, Minato walked out to the garden to find a handful of Japanese raspberries on a leaf left on his porch. An ethereal tale whipped over the garden's wall. Minato remembered his time with his grandfather and that time when the Zashiki Warashi gifted him a 4-leaf clover in exchange for the sweets. He connected the dots and left to find a thank you gift for the mystery giver. With a bundle of sweets and drinks, Minato sat down on his porch and waited. A large white wolf, with colorful highlights, sniffed its way into Minato's garden. What Minato thought was a dog spoke to him and declared his intent to enter his home. The spirit introduced himself as a Yamagami, a god of the neighboring mountain. Minato greeted the god without fear. Yamagami was surprised by how calm the human was. Anyways, with introductions out of the way, Yamagami went straight to enjoy the delicious, fatty fried chicken. Minato offered some sake to wash it down, but the god chose water since he wasn't at full strength yet. Yamagami was pleasantly surprised by the delicious store-bought water. Its flavor competed with the spring water of his mountain. Yamagami thanked Minato for being a lifesaver. He revealed that while he was weakened, evil had run amok. Minato helped exorcise that evil with his handwriting. That was the reason why what he wrote down kept disappearing. Out of nowhere, the gardener came by to fetch a tool he had forgotten. The whole time, Minato was struggling with the giant magical creature next to him, only to realize he was the only one who could see the Yamagami. Hitting it off, our boy gave seconds to the god, and this time it was sparkling water, and at that moment, the god learned what a top G drink is. For at this moment, Minato was wondering why his handwriting had cleansing power. Yamagami asked him if anyone had complimented his writing in the past. Minato thought back to when he made a nameplate as an assignment for school as a child. His family runs a hot spring inn. He carved the inn's name, and his father displayed it on the entrance. One day, a mysterious customer visited and complimented Minato on his wonderful work. The man recommended that Minato make one more and display it at his house as well. He even said he'd pay to have one carved for him. Yamagami suspected that the man could see things others couldn't. Since then, making nameplates for his family's house has become his hobby. He even made some for this house as well. The word Kusunoki on the nameplate shone in a green hue. Yamagami accompanied Minato as he hung the nameplates at the front and back doors of the house. As soon as they were both hung, a green barrier surrounded the entire premises. Now, evil things could not even approach his house. Minato was surprised by this discovery. Yamagami told him that his power is rare. Becoming aware of it and honing it shall grant him even greater power. A few days later, Minato invited Yamagami to more delicious Japanese sweets. The god began to shine brightly. Turns out, as a result of Minato paying respect to him, the big doggo could gain power. Seeing this, Minato put his hands together and offered thanks to Yamagami for visiting his house. Yamagami began to shine even brighter, enjoying his praise, until he asked the god to dial it down since his good boy aura was starting to become blinding. Elsewhere, we see the four-eyed lad Saiga yet again. Alongside a man and a woman, they used incantations and charms to dispel evil spirits. One of the spirits broke out of the window and tried to escape, so Saiga jumped out after it. He needed to exorcise it before it reached the shopping mall district and hurt someone. In his path, Saiga saw Minato walking around reading his shopping list. The evil spirit headed straight for him. As soon as the spirit touched Minato, it dispersed and left behind a small orb. Needless to say, Saiga was confused as F and wanted some answers, any answer. However, the young man was not on the same wavelength as him, as he was complaining about his shopping list vanishing. Although confused, Saiga ended up helping Minato remember what he wanted to get and pointed him to a nearby store. The orb that resulted from the exorcised spirit rolled into a nearby alleyway. The next day, while Minato was asleep, Yamagami used his power to transform the garden. It went from gray and empty to green and bustling with life. Minato noticed that Yamagami had shrunk. It was a result of using his powers. A few days passed, and Yamagami was nowhere to be seen. Minato started to get worried. Luckily, Yamagami appeared and washed away his concerns. This time, he was the size of a puppy. 3 martens ran up next to Yamagami, each identified by a different color at the tip of their tails. The blue tail is Siri, the red tail is Torika, and the yellow tail is Utsuki. Minato was confused about how the old man, Yamagami, could give birth. While I am confused as to why there are entirely different species, like, at least you could make them dogs. Sure, they are not wolves, but they are there in the family tree. Oh well. The 3 minions introduced themselves to Minato after bullying him for calling Yamagami an old man. Using his powers, Yamagami split himself into these 3 martens, which caused him to shrink so much. Minato offered everyone treats. The 3 minions became fans of Minato, as they ate their fill of western sweets and fell asleep. In the meantime, Yamagami returned to his normal size. He sensed a visitor. Outside the house, Saiga sensed an extraordinary aura from the crib. The aura was similar to sacred grounds. After Minato let him in, Harima Saiga introduced himself as an Onmyoji. He asked Minato about his ability to exorcise evil spirits. Evil spirits were on the rise, and there weren't enough onmyoji to fight them back. That said, the middle-aged man had the awareness most 2D characters don't have, which is that you don't recruit a noob to an elite squad, and not one you just met. Instead, Saiga asked Minato to sell him his talisman. Yamagami told him that Saiga wanted paper with his handwriting on it. Saiga looked a bit confused at Minato since he couldn't see Yamagami. Minato told Saiga that his talisman was just a shopping list, not worth a single yen, much to the latter's utter shock. Still, Minato was happy to help, so he decided to write a paper for Saiga. Saiga choked on his tea as Minato wrote down, "White rice, brown rice, oh, one could only wish a bite." Seeing the blessed green hue surrounding the words, the onmyoji knew his power was legit. After writing a bunch, Minato felt a bit lightheaded. Saiga took the papers and offered a large amount of cash to Minato. Minato refused but gave in since Saiga did not back down. As a bonus, Minato drew a pentagram, the symbol of an onmyoji, on Saiga's hand before the latter received a call from his colleagues about a dangerous spirit they were fighting and rushed to the scene. As soon as he ran in, a giant evil spirit attacking his co-workers lunged at Saiga. To everyone's surprise, the spirit was destroyed once it made contact with the pentagram on Saiga's hand. Meanwhile, Yamagami enjoyed the calm night breeze while Minato and the Martins slept peacefully on the porch. The next morning, Minato does some quick math and realizes that he's broke. He has already used up all the money he received for his memo, and no matter how he looks at it, buying all these snacks is going to bankrupt him sooner or later. The Martins do feel bad about eating so many expensive treats, so they ask Minato if he's really okay with this, but he tells them they don't have to worry about it because he wants them to eat well. Minato already considered buying cheaper knockoff snacks for the group, but he already knows they'd be disappointed if that happened, so he needs to figure something else out quickly. He considers getting a part-time job to cover the cost of the snacks, but there's no way he could cover all those expenses on a part-time salary, so he needs to think of something else. Just then, Minato notices an ongoing raffle nearby, and he decides to try his luck, so he buys a ticket, and to his surprise, as soon as he enters, he is informed that he has won the first prize of 100,000 yen. Minato can't believe his luck because this money is enough to cover his snack expenses for the next few months. To celebrate, he decides to get some sake to share with Yamagami, but the second he walks into the store, he is met with several confetti poppers and a crowd of staff members because he just so happens to be the 332nd customer on the store's 333-year anniversary. And so he is given a gift basket of sake as his reward. Minato is surprised by how lucky he has been today, and throughout the rest of the day, he keeps winning all sorts of prizes everywhere he goes. This kind of luck isn't natural, so Minato wonders if this has something to do with Yamagami's powers, but Yamagami says he wasn't the one who buffed Minato's luck, it was the one over there. Minato turns to look in the direction Yamagami is pointing, and he is surprised to see a tortoise spirit sitting on a rock in his pond. Yamagami explains that this is the divine tortoise, Reiki, and he is one of the 4 mythical creatures that bring good luck, so he's the one who has been blessing Minato. Minato still has no idea when Reiki got here in the first place, but Yamagami explains that Minato actually helped Reiki a little while ago, back when he exorcised that evil spirit. And to repay his debt to Minato, Reiki decided to bless him with good luck. Just then, Minato receives a call from his mom, and she tells him that the sweepstakes he happened to enter before he moved out just called her. And apparently, Minato just won 1,000,000 yen, and money like that means he doesn't have to worry about funds for a while, so that luck is really paying off right now. Minato sincerely thanks Reiki for his blessings, and Reiki appreciates the gratitude, but there's one more thing he'd like to ask for in return. He asks Minato if he can live in the pond from now on since he kind of likes it here, and Minato doesn't really have a problem with it, so he agrees to let Reiki stay. A little while later, Reiki is lounging around in the pond when Minato comes over to offer him some sake, and the second Reiki hears that there's alcohol involved, he dashes over to Minato's side to accept his offer. Minato is glad to see that Reiki likes his gift, and to thank Minato for his kindness, Reiki gives him 3 special seeds. Minato doesn't really know what the seeds do, but if they came from a divine tortoise, then they must be good, so he goes to plant them in his garden. After that, Minato bakes a batch of cookies for everyone, and while they are all enjoying the snacks, they suddenly get 2 unexpected visitors, Fujin and Reijin, and they are here to see Yamagami because they wanted to check up on him. After all, he was in really bad shape the last time they saw him, so they were worried that he might have kicked the bucket by now. Yamagami scoffs and tells them it would take a lot more than that to take him out. But on another note, the Martins ask Fujin and Reijin what they are really doing here. But they don't really have a reason for coming. They just heard that this place had become a lot more pleasant recently and wanted to check it out. Sure enough, the air here feels really nice to them, and they can't help but notice that Reiki is drinking a bowl of sake nearby. So they ask if they can have some, and Minato is more than happy to oblige. As thanks for Minato's gift, Fujin offers to let him use some of his power, so he grants Minato his blessing, and now he should be able to use the power of the wind. Minato asks how he's supposed to use the power, and they explain to him that all he needs to do is picture the wind in his mind, which is a lot easier said than done, but Minato decides to give it a try anyway. He closes his eyes and starts imagining the wind, and sure enough, he begins generating a small breeze. It's still pretty weak right now, so Minato is going to have to train if he wants to use it at full power, but overall it's a great blessing. And Minato can't wait to try doing something cool like gathering leaves with this power. Meanwhile, in a haunted building, Harima is walking around when his spirit tries to attack him from behind, but he manages to exorcise it with the help of Minato's sigil. The power in the sigil has almost completely faded now, so Harima can't use it anymore, but he's still surprised that Minato was really capable of making something like this. Just then, Harima hears the sound of Ichijo screaming like a little baby in the other room, so he rushes over to check on him, and it turns out that he is being attacked by a spirit. He yells at Horikawa to get over here and help him, but she's not coming anywhere near that thing, so he's on his own. Ichijo is completely powerless to fight back against the spirit, but at the last second, Harima steps in and exorcises it for him. He then asks if everyone is okay, but instead of being grateful that Harima just saved his life, Ichijo is filled with jealousy. After Harima leaves, Ichijo goes up to Horikawa. She apologizes for not helping him earlier, but that's not what Ichijo is here for. Instead, he asks her if she managed to figure out where Harima got all of his memos, but she has no clue where he got them, and Ichijo is annoyed by how useless she is. So he grabs her by the shirt and asks why she can't even accomplish such a simple task. Horikawa asks Ichijo why he's so hung up on competing with Harima, and she's starting to wonder if it's because he's worried that Harima might be better than him now. And Ichijo really doesn't like being confronted with his insecurities like that, but before he can yell at her, she runs off, and Ichijo swears to himself that he will never lose to Harima. Sometime later, Minato steps out into the garden after a rainstorm, and Yamagami tells him he doesn't need to worry about the garden because, since it is holy land, it is completely unaffected by the rain. Minato is surprised to hear that, but his attention soon shifts elsewhere because he notices that the seeds Reiki gave him have started to sprout. He thinks it's incredible since it practically grew overnight, and he has never seen a tree do that before, but Yamagami tells him this is no ordinary tree. It is a sacred sycamore tree of this holy land, and that sounds like it's really important, so Minato vows to take good care of it. After watering the tree, Minato begins unpacking a few things he had his family send him from home, including some specialty hot spring buns made in his hometown, which he lets Yamagami try, and a set of hiking equipment. Seeing this, Yamagami asks him if he plans on climbing any mountains, and Minato explains that he was actually thinking of climbing Yamagami's mountain, because he is a mountain god after all, and he thought it would be fitting if he went up there to pay his respects. Yamagami warns Minato that climbing his mountain is not going to be easy, but Minato already expected as much, which is why he got the gear in the first place. If Minato is certain that he wants to make the journey up there, then Yamagami isn't going to stop him. So he informs Minato that there is a small shrine about halfway up the mountain. Back in the old days, people used to visit it all the time, but now it is mostly deserted, so Minato says he's going to head there, and Yamagami offers to send the minions with him to act as his guide so he doesn't get lost. A little while later, Minato has begun his climb up the mountain, but he severely underestimated just how hard climbing a mountain actually is, because he is barely halfway to the shrine, and he's already tired. The minions all encourage him to keep going, but that's easy for them to say when they can fly and Minato can't. Minato eventually manages to make it to Yamagami's shrine, and he's a bit surprised by how unkempt the shrine is. The minions tell Minato that he doesn't have to clean it since it has been so long since anyone came here that Yamagami doesn't really care about the state of the shrine anymore. But even so, Minato still thinks that cleaning it is the right thing to do, so he prepares to get to work, and the minions offer to help him as well. Sometime later, thanks to their combined efforts, Yamagami's shrine has been cleaned and restored, and the minions are sure that Yamagami must be happy with how well this all turned out, so it's time for them to return home. But before they can do that, the minions suddenly sense a dark presence on the mountain, so they run off to go confront it, but Minato has no idea what's going on, so he chases after them until they all eventually come face to face with an evil spirit. All Minato can see is a black haze, but he can tell that it must be pretty bad if he can see it at all, so he takes out one of his memos and prepares to exorcise the spirit. Or at least, that's what he'd like to do, but it's hard for him to get close to the thing without putting himself in danger, so he can't find an opportunity to use the memo. Just then, he comes up with an idea and tears out a bunch of pages from his notepad before activating the wind power he got from Fujin to blow them all towards the evil spirit, and once one of the memos makes contact, it gets exorcised. After the exorcism, a deer spirit is released and Minato asks it if it's okay. But the deer runs away before he gets the chance to talk to it, and it's really fast. Minato is just glad that the deer seems to be okay. So after that, he heads home and tells Yamagami all about what happened on the trip up the mountain. Yamagami is grateful that Minato took the time to clean his shrine, but Minato is still curious about the deer he found out there because he wonders what kind of creature it was, but Yamagami tells him he will find out soon enough. Just then, Reiki comes over to tell Minato that someone is here to see him, so Minato goes to answer the door and finds his spirit there waiting for him. At first, he thinks it's the deer spirit from the mountain, but upon closer inspection, this one is clearly different. That said, he still invites it inside, and Yamagami informs Minato that this is Oryu, one of the 4 holy beasts alongside Reiki. Oryu says he wants to repay Minato for helping save him, so he goes over to the sacred tree and activates his power, making rain clouds appear, and all of a sudden, the tree grows to enormous heights. Oryu also asks Minato for permission to live in the pond, and Minato doesn't have a problem with it, but he wonders why Oryu is so interested in him when they haven't met before. Apparently, the spirit that Harima exorcised a while ago was possessing Oryu, so he was set free when Harima used the pentagram, and since Minato was the one who made the pentagram, Oryu wanted to thank him. A little while later, Harima shows up at Minato's house to pick up a new order of memos, and this time, he asks Minato if he'd be willing to draw a grid pattern on his hand instead of a pentagram. Minato asks if he doesn't like the shape of the pentagram, but Harima says that's not the problem. The pentagram simply isn't his family crest, so it wouldn't be appropriate. Minato understands, so he draws the grid pattern Harima asked for, and Harima is really happy with the work. But later, at a bar with his co-worker, he's told that he should be careful not to let anyone else find out about Minato, because if that were to happen, he would be putting a civilian in danger. However, it's already a bit too late for that, because Ichijo has realized Minato's identity, and after following him into town, he places a talisman on his body without him realizing. Back at home, Minato is currently working on some new memos, but over by the fence, Yamagami notices a Shikigami paying close attention to Minato. He remembers hearing Harima warn Minato about one of his colleagues who might be up to no good. He asks Minato if he has noticed anything strange happening recently, like being followed by a creepy blonde dude or something. But Minato doesn't recall anything like that happening to him, so he's not sure what Harima is talking about. Harima explains that ever since Ichijo saw him use one of Minato's talismans, he has been using his Shikigami to try to keep tabs on him. So far, Harima has been able to deal with the Shikigami whenever he spots them, but he's worried that Ichijo might try to pull the same trick on Minato, so he tells him to stay vigilant. Back to the present. Minato may not have much of a sense of danger for these types of situations, but Yamagami isn't going to let some small fry spy on his Minato, so he destroys the Shikigami immediately. However, Ichijo has already managed to gather a lot of info before the Shikigami was destroyed, so he uses that info to track down Minato's house, and soon after, he shows up at the front door. Horikawa is a little nervous and asks Ichijo what he plans to do if he actually meets Minato. And Ichijo says that he's obviously either going to buy all of Minato's talismans or threaten him until he agrees to stop selling talismans to Harima. Horikawa doesn't think that's a good idea, but there's nothing she can say now to convince Ichijo to stop, so he walks up to the door and starts ringing the doorbell obnoxiously. After a few seconds of no one responding, Ichijo becomes impatient and starts yelling for Minato to get out here. He then raises his leg and tries to kick the front door down, but while Yamagami was willing to ignore all of Ichijo's other transgressions, attempting to damage Minato's home was crossing the line. So the next thing Ichijo knows, he has been transported in front of a shrine where everything is colored an ominous shade of red. He is completely alone here, and even an idiot like him can tell that he's in danger, so he starts running for his life. But all of a sudden, one of the tree roots rises just enough to trip Ichijo mid-stride, and the next moment, he falls headfirst into a perfectly placed rock, bashing his head open and killing him on the spot. But a few seconds after that, Ichijo wakes back up in the same spot he started. He is really starting to panic now because he clearly remembers dying a moment ago, yet everything is back to the way it was. Even his watch's time has been reset. As he looks back out into the dark forest, it finally dawns on him. The forest is designed to kill him, and if he dies, it will revive him, so he's about to get the Subaru treatment. Before this, Minato was still leisurely writing out his memos. And Yamagami was flipping through the pages of a magazine when he found out that the latest snack is a bean paste bun with chunky bean paste instead of smooth paste. And even though he's not sure if it will be good, he really wants to try it, so Minato suggests they should go buy some together. This is the first time Minato and Yamagami have gone on an outing together, and Minato is honestly a bit nervous, but Yamagami tells him there's no need to worry because there are very few people who can actually see him. That said, every once in a while, when Yamagami passes by a person who is pure of heart, that person can smell a wonderful scent in the air. An old lady even starts praying once she realizes that a god might be nearby. And seeing this, Minato is reminded that Yamagami really is an important god, and as such, he should be treated like one. Thus, Minato asks Yamagami if he would like to go shopping really quickly before they head to the bun store. Yamagami agrees, so Minato takes him to a pottery shop and offers to buy a special bowl for Yamagami. Yamagami tells him he doesn't need to do that since he's perfectly fine with the bowl Minato has at home, but Minato thinks it's not appropriate for a god to be drinking out of an ordinary bowl, so he wants to get Yamagami something nice. Since Minato is so insistent, Yamagami agrees to accept his gift, and after that, Minato suggests they should get a cushion for Yamagami as well. Yamagami refuses this time and says he doesn't need a cushion because he thinks it will make him look weak, but when he actually tries one, he changes his tune entirely because this is the best thing he has ever sat on. He asks Minato to get it for him, and he'd be happy to, but he tells Yamagami that this one is a little too small for someone of his size, so they are going to need to get one custom made. After that, they finally head to the bun's shop, and when the owner greets Minato, he realizes that it's the same guy he met when he first moved in here. But he seems to be doing a lot better now than he was before. The man asks Minato if he has gotten a chance to explore the mountain since he first showed up here, and Minato confirms that he has been up there a few times, so the man asks him if he has run into the holy dog of the mountain yet. Yamagami wonders why the man is calling him a god when he is a wolf, and Minato doesn't want to reveal that the mountain god is standing right behind him. So he pretends that he has no idea what the man is talking about and asks him to explain. The man tells Minato that the holy dog is a benevolent and kind spirit that lives in the mountains, and he happened to run into it several years ago when he was still a little kid. Back then, he was lost in the mountains and crying because he didn't know how to get home. But all of a sudden, he saw this huge dog staring him down, so he took off running to try and escape. However, no matter how much he ran, the dog would keep appearing right in front of him every so often, forcing him to run in the opposite direction. This continued for several minutes until he ended up back on the right path home, and it was then that he realized that the dog had actually been guiding him. Ever since then, the man had been leaving offerings to the dog to show his gratitude, though he hasn't seen it again since then. After Minato is done buying his buns, he leaves the store with Yamagami, and as he does that, he mentions that the man seems so full of energy now compared to last time. Yamagami says he's actually the reason behind that, because the man is actually suffering from organ problems and he quit eating a lot of his favorite foods in an attempt to stay healthy, but that also drained his morale. Yamagami doesn't have the power to change the biological mechanics of humans, but since the man was such a loyal follower, he decided to use his power to make sure he would feel healthy for the rest of his days, even if his health issues persisted. After that, Minato and Yamagami returned home, where Minato then set up all of the stuff he had bought, but that's when Ichijo showed up, and we already know how that turned out. Ichijo had been stuck in this genjutsu for a while, and at first he thought this was Harima's doing, but now he's starting to wonder if it might be someone in the house doing this to him. Every few minutes, Ichijo died a gruesome death, and shortly after, he was revived so he could suffer yet another death, over and over. Many deaths down the line, Ichijo's spirit had been completely broken, and he just wanted to get out of here so he could stop dying. So he turned to the shrine and desperately asked for forgiveness for his disrespectful actions. He promised that he would never act that way again and begged to be allowed to return home, and it looks like his apology was heartfelt enough to be accepted, because a moment later, Ichijo was sent back to the exact moment he was about to kick the door. Horikawa noticed that Ichijo looked really panicked, so she asked him if something was wrong, but then he asked her how many days it had been. Horikawa didn't know what he was talking about since they had just gotten there, and for her, no time had passed. But for Ichijo, it had been days upon days of death, and he was terrified of getting sent back to that cursed realm, so he ran away as fast as he could. Yamagami was glad that Ichijo was finally gone, and a minute later, Minato got out of the bath and asked if anyone was here since he heard the doorbell ring a minute ago, but Yamagami told him it was nothing to be concerned about. Minato took his word for it, and since there was nothing else going on, he asked Yamagami if he liked the buns he got, and Yamagami admitted that the chunky bean paste wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. Minato sits down on the floor and says he stayed in the bath for a little too long, so now he's really hot. And Yamagami is surprised to hear that because Minato almost always opts for showers instead of baths. Minato admits that he does prefer showers, but he was starting to miss the hot springs back home, so he wanted to enjoy a nice hot bath. Yamagami takes note of this and decides to do something nice for Minato. So the next day, when Minato comes outside, he finds that a fully functional hot spring has been created in his backyard, and normally he would question how it got there, but he literally lives with gods, so doing something like this must be easy for them. So he thanks Yamagami and prepares to get in. After getting into the hot spring, Minato asks where Reiki and Oryu are, and Yamagami assumes they must be at the bottom of the pond. He explains that last night, he, Reiki, and Oryu created the hot spring, and afterwards, they all drank together all night long, so the other two are probably still really tired. If those two helped, then Minato is going to have to make sure to thank them later as well, but for now, he just wants to enjoy this hot spring to the fullest. Sometime later, Minato finally gets out of the spring, and the minions were trying to cool him down because he stayed in there so long that he overheated. However, before Minato could even fully recover, one of the minions comes over and tells him that he had a visitor. Minato heads to the door to see who it is, and after looking around for a bit, he spots the deer from the other day. The deer is too scared to talk to Minato directly, so he asks one of the minions to speak on his behalf and asks Minato if he can come in. And Minato has no problem with it, so he lets Kirin in. Kirin is an extremely shy spirit, and he is having trouble speaking to Minato. So Utsumi decides to act as his translator and tells Minato that Kirin wants to thank him for what he did the other day, and he's apparently got a lot to say, because a whole hour went by, yet Kirin was still talking non-stop, now that he had a translator. In short, Kirin says he would like to reward Minato by granting him the power to control half the world, but that sounds like way too much responsibility to him. So Minato turns his offer down. Kirin doesn't understand how Minato could possibly refuse such power, but just then, Fujin and Raijin come out and explain to Kirin that Minato isn't the kind of person who is greedy for power, so he shouldn't force the gift onto him. A little while later, Minato thanks Raijin and Fujin for helping him turn down Kirin, and they tell him it's no problem because Minato is a person who acknowledges and respects them, so it's the least they could do. In fact, they have a little gift for him. So Fujin pulls out a large swordfish he was keeping in his bag, and once he throws it in the air, he chops it up into sushi with his wind. The others are amazed and ask Minato if he can do the same with his wind powers, but he's nowhere near that good yet. He demonstrates his power, and the best he can do is only a light breeze, but Fujin can tell that Minato is holding himself back. He asks Minato if he is afraid of going all out, and now that Minato thinks about it, he is scared of using too much power with his wind. Fujin tells him his wind powers will only improve once he learns where his limits are by going all out, but Minato says he can't do that because he might hurt someone or destroy the house. Just then, Yamagami comes up with an idea and tells Minato to follow him, and Minato obliges, so Yamagami leads him to the back of the house where there was a door leading to a spiritual space. Yamagami explains that this space was created by the minions, and Minato should be able to unleash his full power here without worrying about any collateral damage. Minato is still a little hesitant because he'd hate to destroy the trees around there, but Yamagami tells him he doesn't need to worry about that because all the trees are fake. Since there was nothing to be concerned about, Minato decides to try going all out after all, and as he raises his hands, he unleashes a massive torrent of wind, greater than anything he has achieved before. But after he's done, he ends up passing out because using all that power at once really wore him out. By autumn time, Minato has mastered control of the wind to the point that he can effortlessly gather up the leaves outside his house and place them in a bag. Yamagami comments on how much Minato's skills have improved since he began training, and Minato is proud of himself, but he still doesn't think he's anywhere near as good as Fujin is. However, Fujin is actually quite impressed by how much progress Minato has made in such a short amount of time, and at this rate, it will only be a matter of time before he's strong enough to destroy the house of someone he doesn't like, but Minato would never do something like that. Raijin asks him if he would like to receive a blessing from him as well, but as tempting as that sounds, the power of lightning is a little too destructive for Minato, so he politely declines the offer. Just then, he notices that the minions aren't here right now, so he asks Yamagami where they went, and he explains that they are currently out training to improve themselves. Their desire to grow stronger likely came from the fact that when they encountered the spirit in the mountains, they were completely helpless against it and had to rely on Minato to save them. So they don't want that kind of situation to happen again. Minato is glad that those guys are working hard to better themselves, and he wishes them luck in their training, But as he speaks, the minions have already fallen asleep because meditating was too boring for them. Later that day, Minato uses the leaves he gathered earlier as a fire starter to roast some sweet potatoes, and he offers some to everyone else, which they all seem to love. But Fujin and Raijin tell him they don't really feel like it right now since they can roast potatoes whenever they want. To demonstrate, Fujin uses his wind to raise the potato into the air, and then Raijin proceeds to bring lightning down upon the potatoes, which technically does cook them. But those potatoes are practically burnt beyond recognition at this point. A moment later, Minato notices a piece of fruit roll up against his foot, and when he looks up, he sees Kirin hiding in the bush over there. Kirin has been bringing all sorts of exotic fruits to show his gratitude to Minato for a while now, but he is still way too scared to even approach him. So Minato is starting to wonder if Kirin is ever going to warm up to him. Just then, the doorbell rings, so Minato goes to check who it is, and he is surprised to see Haruma standing there. Especially because he looks absolutely exhausted and practically collapses onto him. After bringing Haruma inside and getting him a glass of water, he seems to be doing a lot better, and he thanks Minato for his hospitality. But he can't help but notice that the pressure in Minato's home seems to have gotten a lot stronger than it was last time, and it's probably because there are so many gods living here now. But Minato tells him he's probably just imagining things. Moving on, Minato asks him what's wrong. So Harima explains that he just encountered a terrifying apparition, and he was hoping to ask for Minato's help in exorcising it, because it is too much for him or his co-workers to handle. He explains that it all started with a cursed doll that was sent to the temple for purification, but the priest who was in charge of performing the purifications had recently passed away at the time, so there was no one available to perform the purifications. Thus the doll sat there until it eventually became a powerful evil spirit, and judging by just how much power the spirit possesses, it is likely that its true identity is that of a deity. But so far, no one has been able to even enter the temple to investigate because of its power. The inside of that temple functions as its own separate world, similar to how this place works, and since Minato is able to live here, Haruma figured that he'd be able to enter the temple as well. Hearing this, Yamagami gets upset and yells at Harima for daring to ask to use his power out of nowhere like this, and Harima can feel the intense pressure of something bearing down on him. But Minato tells Yamagami to calm down because Harima didn't mean to be disrespectful. He then asks if it would really be possible to enter that temple with Yamagami's power, and Yamagami confirms this, so Minato asks if he's willing to help. Yamagami says he's fine with it, but only on the condition that Harima bring him a proper offering. A little while later, Harima has left an offering of sweet bean buns for Yamagami, and Yamagami really likes them, so he agrees to help, but he won't be going there personally, so he tells Minato that his minions will accompany him there instead. Minato is happy to hear that he won't have to go alone, and he asks if this means the minions have finished training, and they tell him that they have indeed completed their training, one way or another. Minato and the minions then travel all the way to the town where the temple is located, but at one point, the minions get distracted by a store with some apple pie in the window. And just then, the store owner comes out to tell everyone that he's got some freshly baked apple pie, right out of the oven. The minions really seem to want some, so Minato decides to take a break and they all stop for some apple pie. A little while later, they end up spotting a group of crows nearby, and it looks like they are trying to lead him somewhere, so Minato follows them, and they end up showing him the way to the haunted temple. After arriving, Minato sees no signs of Harima nearby, so he calls him to ask if he's here yet, and Harima tells him that he's at the back gate of the temple, but the dark energy here is so powerful that nothing they do can get through it. Minato tries to open the front gate, but simply touching the gate causes him to be pushed back, so the minions tell him to leave this to them, and they work together to push the gate open to create a path for Minato. They then head inside together, and after making their way into the temple, they soon come across an extremely dark presence up ahead, and it looks like those dolls are the culprit. So Minato and the others prepare to deal with them, but all of a sudden, the dolls begin to react and fly out of the building straight towards them at high speed. Minato is the first to react, so he pulls out a memo and blocks the incoming blast, dispelling the evil and returning the dolls to normal. However, the job still isn't done yet because there are more dolls coming, and so the minions all work together to back Minato up and take out the rest of the dolls. They manage to defeat the dolls fairly quickly thanks to all the effort they've put into training, but Usugi still lacks a bit of discipline. So he gets so caught up in celebrating how cool he is for winning his fight that he fails to pay attention to his surroundings and ends up getting caught off guard by one of the dolls. But fortunately, the other minions manage to save him before anything bad happens. Now, there's only one doll left to deal with, but this one is especially powerful, so fighting it isn't going to be easy. Minato takes out all the memos he has in his jacket and uses his wind to launch them at the doll, But the doll is too quick and manages to destroy all the memos before they can get close to her. The doll then smacks all the minions away and wraps Minato up in its hair, strangling him to death with each passing second, and there's nothing he can do about it. Yamagami senses that something is wrong, so he activates his link with the minions and begins sending them some of his power. The minions fly up to Minato and tell him they are going to rescue him. They then activate the power that Yamagami sent to them and unleash a powerful roar that pushes the doll back and rips the hair right out of its head, freeing Minato from its grip. He then falls to the ground and the minions go over to check on him, but he tells them he's perfectly fine. The most important thing right now is to deal with the impurities within the doll, so Minato goes up to it and uses his pen to dispel the darkness. Now that that's finally done, Minato finally feels like he can rest easy, but he is still a little curious about how the minions managed to save him in the first place. They explain that Yamagami simply sent them some of his power remotely, which is how they managed to take the doll down, but despite the fact that the doll was exorcised, they can still feel a powerful darkness in the temple. They head inside and find the corrupted spirit that was behind all of this. Minato wants to cleanse it to stop it from suffering anymore, but as he reaches into his jacket to pull out a memo, he realizes that he has none left. He can't exorcise the spirit without a memo, so he takes out his pen and paper and starts writing down a few more. But even after finishing those and using them, nothing happens because they weren't strong enough to cleanse the spirit. And to make matters worse, Minato is completely out of paper, so he can't draw anymore. Fortunately, one of the minions notices a leaf in the back of Minato's jacket, and it must be one of the fallen leaves from the Kusunoki tree back home, so he decides to use the leaf as a memo since the Kusunoki tree is special, and sure enough, after writing the memo on the leaf, the spirit is cleansed. Unfortunately, that also means that the spirit world it created is starting to crumble, so Minato and the others need to get out of here as soon as possible if they don't want to be stuck here forever. Outside the temple, Harima notices that everything has begun to collapse, and he is really worried about Minato since he must still be in there, but the others tell him it's too dangerous to go in there right now. Minato and the minions are still running to the exit, but before they could get there, a tree begins falling right on top of them, and it would have been over for them, but at the last second, a bolt of lightning destroys the tree and a massive gust of wind blows them all out of the temple. A few moments later, Minato and the minions wake up outside the temple, and they are surprised that they managed to make it out of there alive, but it was all thanks to Raijin and Fujin who were worried and tagged along to keep an eye on them. Later on, after Minato has returned home, Harima goes to his house to thank him for his help, and he also offers him a token of his gratitude. Minato invites him inside to have barbecue with him, but Harima politely turns him down because he's not willing to risk angering any of the many gods that live in Minato's house. Meanwhile, inside, all the others are enjoying themselves with the barbecue Minato prepared, and a little while later, the spirit that he cleansed in the temple seems to have recovered. So he goes to check it out and discovers that it's a chick. Yamagami explains that this is Ho, the last of the 4 gods of fortune, and Ho is very grateful to Minato for saving him. Later on, Minato is working outside as usual while Yamagami enjoys some tasty treats, but just then, Minato notices Ho over there, chirping at a few birds in the garden, and he wonders what he's up to. Yamagami explains that Ho is currently teaching those birds how to chirp properly, and most of the birds get it right the first time, but there's one who messes it up. So Ho decides to start his lesson all over again. Overall, today is pretty calm. So everyone is just lounging around in the garden, but all of a sudden, a portal opens in the sky, and it looks like the peace isn't going to last very long. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Harima and Katsuragi are currently engaged in battle against a group of evil spirits, and there are an awful lot of them. But Katsuragi says he can handle the small ones by himself, so he summons a shark spirit and tells it to start eating the small fries. However, there are still more spirits to deal with, so he summons his number 2, a penguin spirit, and it finishes off the rest of the spirits. But Harima can tell that there is still more to be worried about, so he rushes ahead to check out the situation. Back in town, Minato has just finished shopping for souvenirs for everyone back home, so he is getting ready to head back, but all of a sudden, he notices that a bunch of people are staring at him, and they all seem to be calling him the Bird Whisperer because there are a ton of birds hanging around him. Minato really doesn't like all this attention, so he slinks away before anyone comes up to talk to him, and the reason there are so many birds here in the first place is because Ho is with him. As Minato continues walking, he ends up running into the gardener while he's in the middle of working on a homeowner's hedge. Minato compliments him on the unique choice of design, and the gardener explains that the homeowner told him he could do whatever he wanted with the hedges, so he decided to get as creative as possible. Just then, he gets freaked out by the fact that there are a lot more birds here than there were before, and he asks Minato if he has any idea why this is happening, But Minato just gives a half-assed excuse and says he's gotta go. Back at home, Yamagami is sitting around when the minions suddenly come floating up to him with bad news. They inform him that they have just found several abandoned Kami Realm portals in the mountains that need to be closed, and normally, they would ask Minato for help, but he hasn't come back from his shopping trip yet, so they don't know what to do. Yamagami tells them that there's no need to worry, because if there really are that many portals, then it is probably too much for them to handle, so he is going to go take care of it personally. Minato is still on his way home, but he soon realizes that the birds that were following him a moment ago are all gone now, and he's not sure why. Just then, Fujin and Raijin happen to spot Minato passing by, and they tell him that he had better get back home as soon as he can because it's dangerous out here. Minato asks them what's going on, and Fujin explains that there is an outbreak of abandoned Kami Realm portals, and these portals can appear anywhere at any time, so every now and then, humans might get caught in them if they aren't taken care of immediately. They also tell Minato that he should be especially careful, because he has a high affinity with Kami, so he is much more likely to get caught up in one of the rogue portals, and if he gets sucked into a particularly nasty one, then he won't be able to get out of it on his own. Minato takes their warning very seriously, especially since they tell him that Yamagami is currently out dealing with the problem personally, because it must be really bad for Yamagami to spring into action. Minato says he is going to head home right away, and to save some time, he decides to take a shortcut. On Yamagami's end, he and the minions climb up to a cliff, and they can see tons of abandoned portals from here, so they start working on getting rid of them all before they spread towards Minato's house. Meanwhile, as for Minato, he and Ho have just turned down a corner to take the shortcut back home, but along the way, Minato notices an old shrine nearby that looks like it hasn't been maintained in a long time. All of a sudden, he hears a little voice beside him telling him that he needs to stay away from this place because it's dangerous, but instead of just listening to the warning, he gets confused and starts wondering where it came from. Moments later, the doors of the shrine burst open, revealing a portal behind them, and all of a sudden, Minato is sucked in along with Ho. Ho gets out of Minato's bag and morphs into his true form before letting out an ear-piercing scream, but evidently, he was just doing that to Aura Farm because it did absolutely nothing. And both he and Minato end up getting sucked in anyway. By the time Minato opens his eyes, he finds both himself and Ho in a forest, and he can tell that this must be a Kami realm, so he wants to find the exit as soon as possible. As he is walking around, Minato notices a ton of boxes scattered all around. He thinks it's odd at first, but then he remembers something that Yamagami once told him about Kami realms. They are often created to reflect the mental state of the god that made them, so Minato assumes that whichever god was responsible for making this must have just really liked wooden boxes. After walking for a while, he and Ho end up coming across a cave, so they head inside to take a look around, and as they walk in, Minato comments that the air in here is really stale. After heading deeper into the cave, he soon finds a woman lying on a stone bed, and he assumes she must be the god who created this Kami realm. The woman's name is Amaterasu, and she is having trouble going back to sleep because the air in here is so stuffy. She really wants to air this place out so she can get back to sleep already, but at the same time, she is also way too lazy to do it herself, so she decides to do nothing instead. Just then, Minato calls out to her and asks if she's the one who created this Kami realm, and Amaterasu confirms it, but she also asks Minato what a human like him is doing in here because she's sure she sealed this place off completely. She does recognize Ho as one of her old friends, and she can tell that Minato has the favor of multiple gods, so she knows he's not a threat, but she still doesn't understand why he's here. Minato explains that there are currently a lot of abandoned Kami realms appearing all over the outside world, and he just ended up getting sucked in here. Amaterasu thinks it's a little rude for him to call this place abandoned since she never left, but now that she thinks about it, it has been a long time since she checked on the state of her shrine, and that thing looks absolutely run down now. That said, she's too lazy to care about that, so she decides to just leave it as it is. On another note, she can tell that Minato happens to have a blessing from Fujin, so she asks him if he can use some of that power to air out her room for her. Minato doesn't mind, but he asks her if she can get him out of here in exchange, and Amaterasu agrees, but Minato asks her one more time to make sure. Amaterasu asks him if he really thinks she's the kind of irresponsible god who forgets promises, and honestly, from what Minato has seen of her so far, he does think she's irresponsible. Either way, the only way he's going to get out of here is by helping Amaterasu tidy up, so he prepares to get to work, and Amaterasu also asks him to throw all the boxes he finds into this hole to get rid of the clutter, which he obliges. While that's going on, in the outside world, Yamagami and the minions are still busy dealing with all the portals they can find, and once they are done with everything in the area, Yamagami says it's time to go rescue Minato. The minions don't understand what he's talking about, but Yamagami explains that a little while ago, he sensed Minato getting trapped in a Kami realm, but he was so busy with destroying the portals that he hasn't had the time to go rescue him yet. However, before Yamagami and the others could go save Minato, even more portals began opening in the sky, and now they have to deal with those as well, so they don't have time to go get Minato anymore. Fortunately, at that moment, Fujin and Raijin show up to offer a hand, and Yamagami is grateful for their help because now the minions are free to go save Minato. After the minions are gone, Fujin and Raijin ask Yamagami if he would like to take a break since he has been at this for a while already, but Yamagami tells them they don't have to worry about him. And to prove it, he lets out a loud roar, destroying several portals all at once. Meanwhile, on Minato's end, he has just finished tossing out the last of the boxes, so he gets Amaterasu's attention and asks her if she's satisfied with everything like this, and Amaterasu is greatly pleased because this is the cleanest her room has been in 1,000 years, but the air in here is still rather stuffy. Fortunately, Minato has a plan for that. So he takes out a few Kusunoki leaves, he keeps on hand and swirls them around in the air, and sure enough, the musky smell vanishes. Amaterasu is amazed by how effective those leaves are, so she asks Minato if she can borrow some to use later, and Minato agrees. Amaterasu really likes the scent of the leaves, so as a thank you, she offers to let Minato have some of her power and points her finger at his forehead to transfer the blessing. Minato is grateful for such a valuable gift, but he has no idea what her power does, so Amaterasu explains that it is the power to seal anything using a vessel. Minato asks her what she means by the power to seal, so Amaterasu goes on to explain that over the years, people have come to her, praying to be relieved of some kind of burden, whether it be nightmares, unwanted supernatural powers, or curses. She would then store them in the wooden boxes that she keeps around. She tells Minato that it's up to him whether he wishes to use her power or not because she doesn't really care, and all this explaining has made her rather sleepy, so she lays down to go back to sleep. Unfortunately, she forgot all about her promise to help Minato get out of here, and now that she's fast asleep, there's no way Minato can wake her up, so he doesn't know what he's going to do. Luckily for him, a few moments later, the minions break into the realm and tell Minato that they are here to get him out, which he is really relieved to hear. Once Minato is finally out of the Kami world, the minions ask him if he's alright, and Minato tells them that he's perfectly fine. The minions are glad to hear that since they were worried something bad might have happened to him in there, but Minato explains that he just spent his time helping a very unmotivated goddess, and he was given the power to seal things as a result. Hearing that description, the minions assume that Minato must be talking about Amaterasu. They start walking home together, and along the way, Minato asks the minions how they knew where to find him, and they say they heard Ho's voice come from that temple before Minato got sucked in, and that gave them an idea of where to look. They say they also got a little bit of help from the wind spirits nearby, but Minato doesn't know what they are talking about. The minions explain that there are wind spirits all around him, and now that Minato thinks about it, he does recall hearing a voice try to warn him before he got sucked in. So those must have been the wind spirits, and Minato thanks them for looking out for him. As for what's going on with Haruma, he comes face to face with a separate group of exorcists who he doesn't get along with. This group is known for charging exorbitant amounts of money from normal people, and Haruma has a feeling that they are up to no good. A little while later, Minato returns home, so he calls out to Yamagami because he got a gift for him, but he is surprised to find out that Yamagami is tiny again. Yamagami explains that he just ended up using too much of his power when he was dealing with those portals, but he should be back to normal in no time after a good meal. Some time goes by, Minato is starting to get worried about Ho since he has been asleep ever since he used his true form. Yamagami says Ho must have used too much of his true power, but there's no need to worry because something like this isn't enough to kill him, and it's only a matter of time before Ho eventually wakes up. In the meantime, Minato decides to start practicing with the sealing power he received from Amaterasu. He's hoping that if he can learn to seal some of his exorcism power, then he will be able to give it to Harima to help him out. And Yamagami thinks it's a great idea, since it would be a shame for all of Minato's excess power to go to waste. But when Minato tries to seal the power in the box, Yamagami can see that there are still many gaps in his seal, so the power is actively leaking out as they speak, so it looks like Minato still has a long way to go before he masters the power. Later that day, Minato prepares a bowl of tea for Yamagami, and Yamagami asks him if he has made any progress with the sealing power, but he has nothing noteworthy to boast about. He does mention that the people who were supposed to come take a look at the house today happened to cancel out of nowhere, and he thinks that's strange because he put a lot of effort into cleaning this place up, and this is the third time someone has canceled on him last minute. Yamagami probably had a hand in making those people cancel, but Minato doesn't know that, and he doesn't understand why anyone would reject a beautiful one-bedroom house with a garden and Yamagami included. Yamagami says he's actually glad they didn't show up because now he gets to enjoy the sweets that Minato prepared for them, and he thinks it's cool that one of them has a little sakura blossom on it, so he decides to do a little redecorating with his powers. In an instant, Yamagami turns the garden's trees into sakura blossoms, and Minato thinks it looks lovely, but when he turns back to Yamagami, all he sees is Minagami sitting there. Yamagami says he may have used a bit too much power for that, but he should be back to normal in no time. Minato asks Yamagami how he even managed to create the sakura blossoms in the first place, and he explains that he used his eyes because that was the easiest method for him. Hearing Yamagami say that his eyes were the easiest method, Minato recalls what Amaterasu said about not necessarily needing to use boxes, and that he should find whatever works best for him. So he decides to try using his regular notepad instead and see if that works out. He immediately gets to work writing, but midway through, he gets distracted by the sounds of the birds chirping outside, and both he and Yamagami think it's lovely, but when it's the last bird's turn to chirp, it sounds horrendous. So horrendous, in fact, that it wakes Ho up just so he can come out and yell at the bird for chirping off-key after all their lessons. Later on, we see Minato and the minions climbing up the mountain in search of some bamboo shoots, which will supposedly help Minato strengthen his sealing power. Meanwhile, back at the house, Fujin and Raijin are drinking with Yamagami, and Fujin mentions that he was the reason those humans who wanted to buy this place didn't show up. He says he chucked them into a kami realm for a few hours before letting them go, and after that, they didn't dare to step foot near there again. Raijin tells him that was an awfully mean thing to do to innocent humans, but then Raijin reminds Yamagami that he put that rude guy in a Deathloop kami world a while back, although that guy actually deserved it for trying to kick down the front door. Just then, the three of them notice another abandoned kami realm floating by, and it looks like it's floating towards the mountain right now, so they assume Minato must be the one attracting it. They can't let the abandoned kami realm suck him in, so Raijin uses a bit of his power to destroy it. But he does find it strange that Minato is capable of attracting kami realms because he has seen many humans in his time, and it is not normal for this kind of thing to happen. Granted, Minato isn't exactly a normal person since despite being a human, he lives among several gods, so that must have had an effect on him. And speaking of Minato getting sucked into a kami realm, Fujin is starting to wonder if he should give Minato some more of his power so that kind of thing won't happen again, but Yamagami warns him not to because if Minato gains any more god powers, he may cease to be human. Fujin doesn't necessarily think that would be a bad thing since it all depends on what Minato uses his powers for, and they know for a fact that Minato isn't the kind of person to do anything bad. Back on the mountain, Minato and the others have finally arrived at the bamboo site, and Minato is getting ready to start digging up some bamboo shoots, but while he's getting his tools out of his bag, a large bear suddenly walks up to him, and he is terrified out of his mind, so he stumbles backwards in an attempt to get away, but there's nowhere for him to go. While he's desperately trying to think of a way to get out of this, Yamagami senses Minato in distress, so he takes over Utsumi's body and rushes over to him to explain that there's nothing to be worried about. The bear over there clearly isn't trying to harm Minato, and after a little translating, they all learn that the bear is actually here to thank him for taking care of their chief, Kirin. And as a show of gratitude, the bear offers to help Minato dig up the bamboo shoots. Minato is still a little shaken by all of this, but it looks like the bear is on his side, and that's a huge relief because after watching it dig up the shoots with one swing of its claw, Minato really wouldn't want to fight that thing. After the bear is done digging, it hands the bamboo shoots over to Minato, and it says he should eat them right away since they are best when freshly harvested. Yamagami also agrees, so Minato ends up preparing the bamboo shoots with what he has on hand, which is pretty much just the raw shoot and some soy sauce, but it tastes good nonetheless. While they are eating, Minato asks Yamagami what the bamboo shoots are supposed to do for his power since he's not really feeling anything different, but Yamagami tells him there's nothing special about these shoots, he just sent Minato out here to get them because he wanted to eat some. He also wanted to give Minato something to do to take his mind off things since he has been stressed out lately ever since he started practicing with his sealing powers. Minato admits that he does feel a lot calmer now than he did before, and the bamboo shoots are pretty tasty too, so this wasn't a wasted trip after all. A little while later, Minato and Yamagami are back home, and Minato asks Yamagami if he'd like to play a game of collapsed shogi with him. Yamagami has never really played a game like this before, but he is confident that he can surpass Minato in any game, so he agrees to play. The rules are simple. You need to drag a piece off the table without it making any noise whatsoever, and the person with the most pieces by the end of the game is the winner. Yamagami is sure that winning will be easy for him, but after playing for a while, Yamagami has only 2 pieces, while Minato has a whole box full. It turns out that opposable thumbs are very useful in situations like this, and Yamagami isn't taking the loss well, but all of a sudden, the pond begins glowing out of nowhere. Minato is very concerned, but Yamagami tells him that this kind of thing happens from time to time since some people get lost and wind up in the pond somehow. This is the first time Minato has ever heard of something like this happening, and a few moments later, a fat god named Ebi pops out. Ebi apologizes for the intrusion, and swears that he's not a shady guy. He just heard about this garden and the human who has been receiving blessings from gods. Minato still isn't sure if he should trust Ebi or not, but Yamagami doesn't seem to be bothered by his presence, so he must be okay then. Minato turns back to talk to Ebi, but Ebi has already sat down next to Minato. He takes a look out at the garden and comments on how nice it is out here. He mentions that he especially loves the fact that there's a hot spring out here, and Minato can tell that Ebi wants to take a dip inside, so he tells him he's free to use it if he wants to. Ebi is really happy to hear that, so he decides to take Minato up on the offer, and as a show of gratitude, he gives Minato a bag of taiyaki. Yamagami is excited to try the taiyaki, so he asks Ebi if it's made with smooth paste, and Ebi says he has all sorts of taiyaki in there, including the smooth paste kind, so Yamagami is satisfied. Minato then shows Ebi to the hot spring, but while Ebi is soaking, he notices Minato with the others, and he comments that Minato is straying quite far from humanity. The next day, Minato is back to working on his seals, and he is starting to get the hang of it, so he goes outside to take a little break, and that's when he notices that he's got a visitor. Her name is Tsumugi, and she had no idea that there was such a lovely hot spring nearby. She asks Minato if he's the owner of this house, but Minato tells her that he's just looking after the place in the meantime. He can see that she's eyeing the hot spring, so he asks if she wants to soak in it. But Tsumugi denies having such frivolous desires because she has an important errand to complete, even though she clearly wants to enjoy the hot spring. Minato asks her if the errand she's running is urgent, and she says it technically isn't, but she's still trying to act like she's not interested in relaxing here. However, when Minato mentions that he was just about to prepare lunch, Tsumugi completely caves and admits that she wants to stay for a bit, and Minato is more than happy to accommodate her. She introduces herself as the minion of the god of the mountain that's next to this mountain, and Minato is a bit surprised since he didn't know the other mountains around here had gods as well. Tsumugi then goes to greet Yamagami, and Yamagami seems to recognize her, so he says she's free to stay and eat with them. A little while later, Minato is done preparing the food, and as Tsumugi takes the first bite, she absolutely loves it. She finishes every last bit of the food, and to repay Minato's kindness, she offers him a sacred peach that was harvested in the garden they have back on the other mountain. Though peaches like this are generally only safe for Kami to eat, so Minato probably shouldn't eat something like this. Still, Tsumugi tells him he can try using it as a decoration, since it's pretty and it will literally never go bad. Minato accepts the gift and tells Tsumugi she can still use the hot spring if she wants to, and Tsumugi is very grateful. But before she gets in, she asks Minato if he has ever used the hot spring before. He responds and tells her he bathes there every day, and Tsumugi says that explains why Minato doesn't feel like a human to her, which catches Minato off guard a little. Once Tsumugi is done with her soak, she flies off to continue her errands, and after saying goodbye to her, he asks Yamagami if he really isn't a human anymore. He more or less suspected it after what Ebi said last time, and it makes sense that he would be affected after being around so many gods so often, but he's honestly kind of scared of what he may become. Yamagami agrees that Minato definitely is changing, but he assures him that no matter what powers he gets, he will still always remain himself. Minato asks if that means he will still be able to live and die as a human one day, and Yamagami promises that Minato will still be able to live a normal life. Minato is happy to hear that, so he decides to continue trying to master his powers, and Yamagami tells him that the key to mastering the ability to seal things may lie in his past. After all, he said he was able to see things that weren't human even as a kid, and Minato tries to recall his earliest memory of his encounters with them. He remembers that after finding a 4-leaf clover on the shelf that day, he saw Warashi standing by the doorway, and it was pretty clear that she had left it there as a gift for him. So he was really happy that she had chosen to interact with him. He went outside to tell his grandpa about what just happened, and after learning that Warashi left him a gift, his grandpa told him that this must be her way of saying she wants to become friends and thanking Minato for the snacks he gave her earlier. Minato's grandpa was happy that Warashi and Minato were able to get along well because Warashi was a yokai that had lived in the house since before even Minato's grandpa was born, so he spent a lot of his childhood with her. And now, she seems really fond of Minato as well. After Minato and Warashi became friends, they would often end up playing games together to pass the time, and Minato's grandpa loved watching the two of them have fun together. He had the ability to see all sorts of yokai that even Minato couldn't see at the time, but not all of them were as nice and well-behaved as Warashi, because Nu, for example, was always messing up his leaves. One day, while Minato was heading back into the house after playing outside, he had his hat snatched by one of the yokai who lived there, Hai-Hai, and Hai-Hai was just doing this to mess with Minato, so it made him really upset. He ran off to go tell his grandpa about what Hai-Hai did to him, and his grandpa low-key thinks it was kind of funny. He explains that Hai-Hai has nothing better to do, so he's likely messing with Minato out of boredom, not malice, so he should stop doing it soon. But either way, Minato doesn't like getting his hat snatched, so he starts thinking of ways to deal with Heihi. The next day, after Minato is done playing outside, it's time for him to head back, but he already knows Heihi is probably going to be waiting for him, so he starts looking around for any signs of him. When he thinks the coast is clear, he makes a break for the front door, but unfortunately, Heihi still manages to snatch his hat. However, Minato came prepared today, so instead of simply begging for his hat back, Minato has come to bargain. He offers to give Heihi a Castella cake in exchange for getting his hat back, and Heihi seems really tempted by the offer, but Minato then adds the condition that he can only have the cake if he promises not to mess with him anymore. Heihi already really wants the cake, so he agrees without a second thought, meaning Minato successfully gets his hat back while also making sure he won't have to deal with this sort of thing from Heihi in the future. And after that, he became good friends with Heihi, more or less at least, and some time after that, Minato's grandpa ended up passing away. Sometime later, Minato was walking back from school with his friend, Ranmaru, and the weather was insanely hot. So they were talking about getting some ice cream or shaved ice later. However, all of a sudden, Minato notices a giant rock yokai emerge from the ground nearby, and he recalls that his grandpa had warned him that if he ever ran into a yokai outside the house, then he should run away as soon as possible because not all yokai are friendly, and it's not safe to take the risk of encountering one outside. The rock yokai is getting closer, but Ranmaru has no idea what's happening because he can't see it, so Minato tries to make up an excuse to get him to leave with him. But Ranmaru still doesn't understand what is going on. The yokai is about to attack them, but all of a sudden, a man nearby claps his hands, and before Minato knows it, the yokai is gone. The man then tells the kids that it's not safe to be out here in this kind of heat because they could suffer from heat stroke. He then asks them if they can show him around because he had heard that there was a nice hot spring in the area, but he didn't know where to find it. The two agree to show the man around, and he ends up staying at Minato's family inn during his time in town. But for some reason, while the man is there, all the yokai are constantly on edge and trying to avoid him. At one point, while Minato is busy doing his homework and the man is busy reading the newspapers, he happens to notice that Minato's handwriting seems pretty special, so he approaches him and tells him as much. Minato thanks the man for his praise even though he doesn't really know what he is talking about since this is just homework. But looking back on it now, he's pretty sure the man must have been able to sense that his handwriting has exorcising power in it. Yamagami agrees and says he believes that man must have been a traveling exorcist, and judging by how Minato described him, he must have been a pretty powerful one at that. Minato says that makes sense since it explains why all the yokai were avoiding him back then. On another note, Yamagami asks Minato how his sealing power training has been going, and Minato says he has been regularly practicing how to seal his elimination power, and he thinks he finally has the hang of it. So he tries one more time under Yamagami's guidance, and this time, he manages to perfectly seal his power in the paper, so his training is finally complete. Later on, we see two exorcists, Tsubaki and Fujino, in an abandoned building dealing with a bunch of evil spirits, and after they are done with the group here, they meet up with Haruma because they've done all they can with their spirit, power, and weapons, so if they want to keep going, they are going to need some of those talismans Haruma gets from his supplier. Haruma hands them 2 talismans, but just then, a few of the other exorcists come running by with dozens of spirits on their tails, and they are in serious trouble. So Haruma takes out a few more talismans and throws them at the girls so they can finally exorcise the spirits chasing them and save their lives. They are all relieved that they managed to survive, and they are really grateful to the Jade One who made these talismans. They are all sick of this place and want to go home so they can relax, but they still need to get rid of the rest of the evil spirits in this place, and Haruma only has one more talisman from Minato on him, so he needs to go get more. When his sisters realize that Haruma is on his way to meet the maker of the talismans, they all start asking him what the Jade One is like and if they can come along with him. But Haruma doesn't want them bothering Minato because he honestly doesn't think they can handle him. The next day, Haruma heads over to Minato's house with a gift as usual, and he takes a brief moment outside to prepare himself before stepping in. at which point he is met with the immense pressure of the multiple gods who reside here. He manages to make his way over to Minato without passing out, and Minato can tell that Harima doesn't look so good right now, but Harima assures him that everything is fine. More importantly, he asks Minato if he has prepared the talismans that he asked for the other day, and Minato informs him that they are all ready. He even adds that since he recently gained a new sealing power, he used it to seal the elimination energy into the talismans, so now the energy won't leak out anymore, and it should last a lot longer. Harima thanks Minato for the hard work, and it's about time for him to get going. But just then, Raijin and Fujin show up, and when they see Harima's exhausted state, they feel bad for him. And Raijin wants to make him feel better, so he decides to give him a little electric shock to energize him a little. However, he overestimated how much energy Harima's body could take, so by the time he was finished, Harima was cooked, literally. Harima managed to survive, but Minato feels bad that he got hurt, and he is really worried about him. Yamagami assures Minato that there's no need to be so worried because he's sure Harima will make a full recovery. But to be honest, right now, Yamagami is much more interested in trying the new mochi flavor they just got from the store. As they continue walking, Minato starts to notice that things don't seem right around here, but before he has any time to react, an abandoned Kami realm opens up behind him and Yamagami, and they both end up falling in. They both end up deep inside some sort of cave, and Minato can tell that this is the Kami realm of some god, so he asks Yamagami if he knows how to get out of here. Yamagami says the god who owns this Kami realm is likely weakened, so Minato should be able to use his wind power to tear them a hole out of here. Minato is about to do so, but then he starts wondering what's going to happen to the Kami that live here after they leave this Kami realm. Yamagami says that with no one to fix it, the impurities here will likely continue to grow, and eventually the Kami here will cease to exist, and Minato can't bring himself to just sit by and let the Kami die, so he decides to try to save them before leaving. Yamagami kind of expected that kind of response from Minato since he's too kind to let this kind of thing go, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, so he agrees to help him look for the Kami. They eventually come across a sword with a lot of dark energy coming off it, and Minato asks if this is the Kami of this realm. Yamagami explains that man-made objects can't become Kami, so it is likely that a spirit was channeled into the sword by someone, and that spirit is the real Kami of this realm. The sword spirit seems particularly aggressive for some reason, so Yamagami asks Minato if he wants to just eliminate it and call it a day, but Minato doesn't think it's the Kami's fault. After all, it is likely only angry because it wasn't looked after and was left to rust, so Minato wants to at least try purifying it first, and he's going to use one of his new talismans to do it. With the extra boost from the sealing magic, Minato is able to completely get rid of all the negative energy that was surrounding the sword, but he's not sure what to do with it now. Yamagami says he can leave the rest to him and proceeds to put his paw on the sword, filling it with his energy before storing it away. Minato asks what Yamagami did, but Yamagami just tells him he rescued the sword, and to be honest, he's not sure how it's going to turn out since he has never taken care of a sword before, but it can't be that bad. More importantly, now that the sword has been removed, this Kami realm is beginning to crumble, so Yamagami tells Minato to hurry up and create a path out of here with his wind magic before it's too late. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the exorcists are still busy fighting the spirits in that abandoned building, and they are being overrun by spirits at this point. But fortunately, Harima arrives just in time to save them with the talismans he got from Minato, and they are all amazed because these ones seem so much more effective than the previous batch. Harima explains that Minato apparently sealed the power in the talismans, so they should last a lot longer now, and all his sisters are even more impressed with Minato's work than they were before. They really wish they could meet him someday, and as luck would have it, that day is today because Minato happens to pop out of the Kami realm right in front of them. However, the talismans that he is holding tightly right now appear so bright to them that they can't get a good look at him. Minato is a little confused because he doesn't know how he ended up here, but he decides to start making his way back home because it's getting pretty late out. As he is walking by, he notices Harima's mentor, and for a second, he is reminded of that man from his past, so he starts wondering whether that could be the same guy. But instead of going up to talk to him, he decides that there's no way that could be the same guy, so he just keeps walking. Just then, Harima notices a group of Ansho exorcists hiding out nearby, and he is a little concerned by their presence because they are no doubt up to no good. Meanwhile, back at Minato's house, he and Yamagami have just finished trying the mochi they got earlier, and Yamagami finally returns to full size. He then scratches his ear, and a glowing orb falls out, so Minato asks what it is, and Yamagami explains that it's the spirit they rescued earlier. Yamagami plans to give it a vessel so it can become his minion, but first, it still needs to rest quite a bit because it's low on energy. So Minato decides to put it in a nice, safe spot so no one will disturb it. A few days later, the weather is unusually hot, so Minato is relieved to be back in the garden since the weather here is always perfect. But Yamagami thinks it could use a little sprucing up, so he decides to perform some renovations on the garden. Minato asks him if he's sure that's a good idea, since if he overuses his powers again, he is going to end up becoming tiny again. But Yamagami assures him that that won't happen as long as he doesn't go overboard. Yamagami then proceeds to use his powers to create a stream in the garden, and Minato thinks it is very lovely. But Yamagami isn't satisfied yet, so he uses his powers again to add a bridge to the stream, and then once more to move the stream over by an inch. Minato tries to warn Yamagami that he is really close to going overboard here, but Yamagami is too locked in on creating the perfect garden design right now to listen to him. So he ends up overdoing it just like Minato said he would and making a waterfall in the garden, which results in him turning back into Minigami. The minions all scold Yamagami because they've told him multiple times to be careful when he's using his powers so he doesn't end up in this tiny state. But Yamagami doesn't think it's that big of a deal since he can always return to his big form given enough time, and besides, he doesn't think being small is so bad. Minato asks Yamagami why he is so obsessed with renovating the garden all the time, so Yamagami explains that it's simply his hobby, so he wanted to change things around a little to match the season, and Minato can't really argue with that. He decides to go check on the Kami that they rescued the other day, but the little guy hasn't woken up at all since they found him, so Minato is starting to grow a little concerned. However, Utsumi tells him that there's no need to worry because the Kami is probably just fatigued right now, so it should wake up once it is done resting. Just then, Minato notices some koi fish swimming in the water, and he's rather surprised by this since this stream was newly created and isn't connected to any bodies of water. Yamagami explains that they likely got lost here, so there's no cause for concern, and as Minato watches, he sees the koi swim up the waterfall and fly into the sky. Those koi were the minions of the mountain god of the neighboring mountain, just like Tsumugi, and speaking of Tsumugi, Minato hasn't seen her at all since last time, so he wonders if she's doing alright. Yamagami has no idea what's going on with Tsumugi, but he does recall that the peach she gave him ended up tasting extremely bitter, and he's a little pissed that they would give out such low-quality food. Minato could sense a hint of resentment in Yamagami's voice as he said all that, so he asks if he is perchance not on good terms with the neighboring mountain god. And Yamagami would be lying if he said they get along well, so he admits that Minato is right. Minato can't help but wonder what kind of god it is if Yamagami doesn't like them. Just then, the sky begins to darken, and Minato sees a giant dragon descend, so he begins panicking. But Yamagami tells him there's nothing to worry about because this is just one of Oryu's friends. With a flash of light, the dragon shrinks down to the same size as Oryu, and he then politely asks Minato if he can come in. Minato has no problem with it, so he invites the dragon in, and as a token of his appreciation, the dragon presents Minato with a little gift, and another, and then another. Minato eventually tells him to stop with all the gifts, so the dragon stops and has a little reunion with Oryu over some wine. A few hours later, the dragon needs to get going, so he goes up to Minato and thanks him for inviting him in before flying away. Minato thinks the dragon was pretty nice, so he's welcome to come back anytime, but he is wondering what all those gifts earlier were. He opens up the first box, and he is pleasantly surprised to find some mooncakes in there, and the rest of the boxes have similar treats in them. So Minato believes that if Yamagami eats them, then he might be able to return to his normal size right away. Thus, they decide to let Yamagami have all the treats, but to their disappointment, even after he has eaten all of them, he doesn't grow any bigger, so they are going to need to get even more treats. Minato and Yamagami head out into town to buy some premium snacks, but as they are returning home, Minato happens to notice a mountain nearby, and it looks like this is the mountain belonging to the god Tsumugi serves. All of a sudden, Minato feels an invisible force pulling him in, and he is so startled that he isn't able to fight back, but luckily, Yamagami was quick enough to stop it, and he is outraged that Tenko would try to take Minato forcefully, especially when she hasn't dared to show herself to him in person yet. Minato then looks up and sees a nine-tailed fox standing on top of the mountain gate, and he assumes that this must be the god that Yamagami was referring to, but she disappears without saying a word after that. Minato asks if what just happened was because he and Tenko don't get along, but he says that while they aren't friends, they aren't enemies either, so she wouldn't do something like this just to annoy him. He says she was actually trying to invite Minato into her domain, which is surprising to Minato since he has never seen Tenko before, so he doesn't understand why she would want to invite him in. Yamagami explains that Kami are able to see everything their minions see, so she knows Minato through his interactions with Tsumugi, and that likely made her interested in him. Minato says he wouldn't mind accepting the invitation if Tenko hadn't been so forceful, but Yamagami warns him that Tenko is really possessive, so if he steps in there, she may not let him leave afterwards. And after hearing that, Minato changes his mind about accepting Tenko's invitation. Meanwhile, over in the Exorcist HQ, Harima mentions that he saw an exorcist from a different group the other day while they were exorcising that hospital, and he is a little concerned about it, especially since Ansho had no reason to be in their jurisdiction. Right now, there's no telling what they are planning, but they are sure it's no good, so they are going to look into it. And to give you an idea of who Ansho is, he was called over to an old lady's house because she had been experiencing back pain lately. So he brazenly lied to her face, saying it was caused by an evil spirit, and then offered to sell her some premium exorcism seals that don't actually do anything just to make a quick buck. After getting back home, Minato lets Yamagami eat all the snacks he just bought. But even though he just ate a lot of food, Yamagami still doesn't seem to be growing at all. And Minato is starting to get worried. But Yamagami tells him that there's no need to rush because he will return to his original size sooner or later. Just then, Minato notices a few fallen branches from the tree on the floor, and it gives him an idea. So he takes a few of the branches and takes them to the porch so he can try his hand at carving patterns into them. Yamagami asks him what he's up to, so Minato explains that he's just trying to make some keychains for the customers at his parents' inn, and after several failed attempts, Minato eventually manages to carve a perfect design into one, and he has already sealed some of his exorcism powers into it. So he decides to give his first successful attempt to Yamagami to wear as an amulet, though he's not sure how useful it's going to be to a god like him. Even so, Yamagami still thanks Minato for the gift and agrees to wear it, but just then, the two notice that they have a new visitor, and this time, it looks like it's a regular squirrel. The squirrel is apparently asking Minato to let him have one of those wood carvings, and Minato would be happy to make one for the squirrel, but unfortunately, he's all out of wood, so he can't make any more right now. The squirrel says it would be happy to settle for one of Minato's failed attempts instead, so Minato agrees to give the squirrel what it wants, and it runs off immediately after. It turns out that the squirrel was asking for the wood because one of its friends was suffering from a curse, and thanks to Minato's power in the wood, the squirrel is able to cure its friend. Back at Minato's house, Minato has just finished preparing some snacks for everyone, and it smells great. So good, in fact, that Yamagami jokes that they had better eat up quickly before a certain fox wanders over here. Minato can tell that Yamagami is talking about Tsumugi, but he doesn't think Tsumugi would show up again so soon. However, he turns out to be wrong because a few moments later, Tsumugi shows up. He asks Tsumugi if she came here because she smelled his Inarazushi, and Tsumugi tries to deny it at first, but she's not fooling anyone, so she asks Minato if she can come in, and he says it's fine. Minato then asks her if she would like to try some of his fresh Inarazushi, even though it's just simple white rice, and Tsumugi says she would absolutely love that. Minato then asks if she would like to try a bachi made with soba instead of rice, and Tsumugi has never heard of that sort of thing before, but she'd still love to try it. However, just as she's about to dig in, she remembers the real reason she came here today, so she tells Minato that she's here to apologize for what happened the other day because her master was unreasonably forceful with her invitation. Minato says it's fine since it didn't really bother him that much, and besides, he thinks it was lucky that he got to see a nine-tailed fox in the first place. Tsumugi informs Minato that the number of tails a fox has is actually an indication of how powerful they are, and Tenko is so powerful because her shrine is one of the most visited shrines in the area, though all the people who visit do make it really noisy there. However, while Tsumugi was in the middle of describing the shrine, the pattern on her head begins to glow, and all of a sudden, the number of her tails begins to increase because Tenko has just taken control of her body. Tenko then tells Minato that while it's true that her shrine is quite noisy, her Kami realm is nice and quiet, so he is free to come visit her there whenever he likes, and it would be nice if he brought some of those Inarazushi snacks as well. Yamagami calls Tenko a shameless glutton for sneaking in here just so she could ask for Minato's food, but she tells Yamagami he's no better because he once stopped a whole volcano eruption just to save his favorite sweet shop. Yamagami tells her to get out of here right this instant because he never gave permission for her to enter, but Tenko reminds him that Tsumugi was given permission, and since she's possessing Tsumugi's body, that permission extends to her. Besides, if she were going to request permission, it would have to be from Minato since he's the one who's in charge of this place. Tenko and Yamagami continue arguing, and it soon devolves into a battle with Yamagami throwing the first attack and Tenko blocking it while mocking him for being weaker than usual. Tenko herself is also weakened right now since she is manifesting herself through Tsumugi's body, but even in this state, she is certain that she can handle Yamagami even like this. Minato wants to calm them down, but it's already too late for that. So the two end up taking their battle into the sky, and for the most part it looks like they are evenly matched, but then one of Tenko's stray blasts ends up heading towards Minato, and Yamagami is forced to fly back down and take the blast in order to save him, and after he hits the ground, Minato goes over to ask him if he's okay. Tenko seems pleased with herself for beating Yamagami even if it was by accident, and she tells Yamagami that hanging around a human may be weakening him overall. But Yamagami doesn't want to hear that coming from the fox that seduced her own shrine priest. Tenko defends herself and makes it clear that she didn't seduce anyone. People simply fell in love with her on their own, and that wasn't her fault. And that aside, she is serious about what she said before, because she has been in contact with countless humans before, and she knows for a fact that getting too involved with them will lead to your destruction. After that, she teleports herself away, and Minato goes over to Yamagami to check if he's okay. Yamagami says there's nothing to worry about because he's not hurt, and it's all thanks to the amulet Minato gave him, but he apologizes for ruining the gift. Minato tells him there's no need to worry about it since he can always make another, but he asks if what Tenko said is true, and if it's really okay for him to continue to stay with Yamagami if so. But Yamagami tells Minato he has nothing to worry about because he is here because he wants to be here, and there's nothing more to it. Meanwhile, the Ansho exorcists are on their way home after scamming the old lady, and they can't stop laughing to themselves about how gullible that lady was, but just then, they get knocked over and cornered by Harima and the others, and he threatens them to never show their faces in this town again because he already knows what they have been up to. The two run off scared, and Harima hopes that was enough to scare them off for good, because he doesn't want anyone else here getting scammed by them. The Ansho exorcists keep running until they end up in the forest, and they are pissed that they got caught by the Onmyoji, but they have no way to fight back against the power of a genuine exorcist. However, just then, one of them happens to spot the wood carving that Minato gave to that squirrel lying on the ground under a tree, and he can tell that there's something special about it. So he comes up with a devious plan. A little while later, Minato receives a box of oranges from his mom, so he brings them home to share with all the others, but he notices that Yamagami seems a little down compared to how he usually is. He assumes it must have something to do with him being upset about the fact that he lost to Tenko last time, and that may also be why he hasn't gotten back to his original size yet. So Minato wants to try cheering him up a little. To do so, he invites Yamagami out to go try some tasty treats in town, and the minions are in support of Minato's plan, so they tell Yamagami that there's no need for him to worry because they will watch over the garden while he's gone. Yamagami sees no reason to refuse, so he agrees to go out with Minato, and along the way, Minato offers to let Yamagami ride on his shoulders so he won't have to walk all the way there, which Yamagami gladly takes him up on. As they walk through town, Minato asks if there's anywhere in particular that Yamagami would like to eat, but Yamagami isn't really sure what he wants right now. He continues looking around for a little while longer to see if anything piques his interest, and eventually, something does grab Yamagami's attention, but it's not a restaurant. It's the building for Musashi Publications, Yamagami's favorite newsletter, and Yamagami apparently has something he wants to say to them. So he starts heading inside, and Minato is forced to follow, but he really doesn't like where this is heading. Inside the building, a man named Tawada is cursing his rotten luck because he has been possessed by evil spirits a lot lately. But just then, he ends up running into the company president. The president is happy to see Tawada and tells him that his segment last month on Chunky Bean Paste was really good, and if it reaches the mountain god, he is sure to love it. He says he can't wait to see what Tawada's next article is going to be about, and he'd love to talk with him some more, but he has a meeting to get back to, so he says goodbye for now. Tawada then continues on his way, but he can't help but laugh at what the president said earlier, because there's no way his insignificant articles would ever reach the eyes of a god. Just then, the evil spirit that has been plaguing Tawada manifests behind him and begins choking the life out of him, and he doesn't have the strength to fight back, so the situation is looking really bad for him. Fortunately, just before the evil spirit could choke him out, Yamagami shows up just in time and exorcises it. Tawada then sees Yamagami appear before him, and he is in utter shock because he never could have imagined that he would get to meet a real god. Minato is surprised that Tawada is able to see Yamagami, but Yamagami says he's intentionally allowing himself to be seen right now. Tawada is a little surprised by how cute Yamagami is, but all the same, Yamagami is still a god, so he gives him the appropriate respect. Yamagami asks Tawada if he's the one who writes the articles about sweets, and Tawada confirms it, so Yamagami commends him for writing such great articles. Tawada is overjoyed to be receiving praise from Yamagami himself, so he asks him if he could wait there for a moment because he's sure the president of the company would love to meet him. Yamagami says he's fine with waiting, So Tawada runs over to the phone and calls the president downstairs immediately. A few moments later, the president and the rest of the staff rush downstairs after learning that Yamagami is there, and as soon as they see him, they all kneel down to show their respect. The president mentions that the founder of this company told him a lot about how Yamagami once helped him out and that he would treat Yamagami to sweets every once in a while. Minato is surprised to learn that Yamagami once knew the founder of this company, but that was many decades ago. Anyway, Yamagami tells them that he came today because he has something he wants to tell them. He has been enjoying all their articles, but he would like the next sweets section to be about smooth bean paste instead of chunky bean paste, and as soon as he says this, every worker in the building kicks into overdrive to begin gathering every bit of information about smooth bean paste possible to satisfy Yamagami. Now that Yamagami has said his piece, Minato suggests they should continue on their way to get some sweets, and Yamagami agrees. As they are walking, Minato mentions how surprising it is that Yamagami knew the founder of that company, and he explains that back then, there were a lot more people who could naturally see the supernatural, so it was easier for him to talk to people. Minato is glad to see that Yamagami seems a lot more cheerful now, and a few moments later, they happen to pass by a restaurant that has the delicious scent of curry coming from it. Minato suggests they should go in to try some, and Yamagami agrees, so they head inside. However, to Minato's surprise, after the waitress greets him and comes over with a menu, she actually places 2 menus on the table. Minato asks Yamagami if it's possible that the woman can see him, but Yamagami says it didn't look like she had any ability to sense him. He is a bit intrigued at first, but he soon realizes what's going on, so he just uses some of his power to lift the menu so he can order. Minato tries to warn Yamagami not to use his powers so brazenly in public because it will draw too much attention to them. But Yamagami tells him that this much shouldn't cause any heads to turn in here. And to prove it, he points over at another table, where there's a cup floating next to a woman. Minato is puzzled and asks how the woman is doing that, but Yamagami explains that there's actually a little god sitting on the table next to her, and when Minato focuses a little more on the table, he realizes that there really is a god there. He then looks over at a man sitting at the adjacent table, and he asks if there are any supernatural creatures next to him, to which Yamagami informs him that there are actually several small yokai on his table. Minato wonders why he can't see the yokai then since he used to be able to, but Yamagami says it's likely because it has been a long time since he has been to his parents' house, so his yokai perception has likely dulled. Minato thinks that makes sense, but still, he finds it hard to believe that there's a restaurant in the middle of town where gods and humans casually hang out. However, Yamagami points out that Minato's house is literally the same, and he can't really argue with that. Anyway, Yamagami says it's about time for them to order their curry, so Minato calls the waitress over, and a few minutes later, the curry is ready. Both he and Yamagami start eating, and they think it tastes amazing, but while they are eating, Minato notices that on the next table over, there's a pair of scissors moving on their own. Yamagami tells him that it's perfectly normal since that pair of scissors is a Tsukumogami. Minato doesn't really know what that means, so Yamagami goes on to explain that a Tsukumogami is an object that has been treated with such love and care that it develops a soul. He's surprised that Minato doesn't know about them considering the fact that there's one in his house, but Minato had no idea about it. Yamagami informs him that the wind chime on his porch is actually a Tsukumogami. Granted, it doesn't really do much because it just wants to chill as a wind chime, but it is very much alive. Just then, a customer leaves the restaurant, but Minato notices that the bell didn't ring even though he opened the door as he was leaving. Yamagami tells him the bell is likely a Tsukumogami whose job is to alert the staff whenever someone enters with something that isn't human, which is likely how the waitress knew to give them 2 menus instead of 1. Just then, Yamagami receives a message from the minions warning him that 2 suspicious dudes just showed up at the front door, and it looks like they are up to no good. Yamagami tells the minions to keep an eye on the guys until he gets back, and at the same time, those 2 have just walked up to Minato's front door to confirm that he really is the one who made this keychain, and the fact that the handwriting on the nameplate here is the same is proof enough for them. They plan to go in and try to talk Minato into selling these tags to them for cheap so they can make a fortune off reselling them. They then begin aggressively ringing the doorbell over and over, trying to get Minato to come out. After doing this for a while, they finally realize that he may not be at home right now, but instead of just turning around and deciding to come back later, they take out a crowbar and start trying to pry the front door open. The minions report all this back to Yamagami, but he doesn't want to leave his meal to come deal with them, so he tells the minions they can handle it however they see fit. So they decide to make these 2 jerks regret ever trying to mess with Minato. The jerks are still busy trying to pry Minato's front gate open when all of a sudden, the gate swings open on its own. The 2 find it strange that the gate is unlocked, but they assume that the owner was just being careless, so they walk inside, and after confirming that no one is home, they plan to search through the house to find wherever Minato stores those keychains. However, even after walking around for a while, they find nothing but empty corridors no matter where they look. They don't understand what's going on since this house clearly wasn't big enough to fit this many corridors from the outside, and for some reason, they've been smelling the scent of oranges, even though there are no oranges in sight. Unbeknownst to the two crooks, the minions are floating behind them, and they are the ones who trapped them in this genjutsu. But it's more than just a bunch of endless corridors because all of a sudden, the corridor begins collapsing into a dark, empty void. The men try to run away as fast as they can, but eventually, the void catches up to them, and they end up plummeting to their demise. After an indeterminate amount of time, the two find themselves back outside Minato's house, and they want nothing to do with whatever is going on inside, so they immediately start running away as fast as they can. Meanwhile, Yamagami and Minato have just finished their meal at the restaurant and are leaving, and though they had a good time, Minato is still a little worried because he thought cheering Yamagami up would help him grow back to his normal size, but he's still small. Though it's not like Yamagami seems all too bothered by the fact that he's small, so Minato decides not to make a big deal out of it. As they are walking home, Minato happens to notice an old woman at one of Yamagami's shrines, and she is there making an offering to him. She soon notices Minato nearby and asks him if he's there to leave an offering as well, but before Minato can say anything, the woman's daughter soon shows up, and she was worried sick about her mother because the journey here is quite dangerous. She had told her mother over and over not to come here alone, but the old woman was once helped by Yamagami, so she can't help but bring offerings to him every now and then. After that, the lady and her daughter leave. Minato thinks it is wonderful that Yamagami is still so loved and cherished by the people here, but as he turns back to Yamagami, he realizes that he has grown back to his normal size, and he actually seems even more magnificent than he was before. Yamagami tells Minato that there's no need to be surprised because he did tell him that he would return to his normal size in due time, and Minato admits that he had assumed the reason Yamagami wasn't returning to his true size was because he was depressed about his loss against Tenko. However, Yamagami tells him that the real reason he was upset was because he read the newsletter that morning and saw an article on chunky bean paste again, which is why he wanted to tell them to switch to writing about smooth bean paste. Minato is surprised that Yamagami was depressed over something as simple as that, but he does think that going out and seeing all the people who still believe in him helped Yamagami get his powers back. Meanwhile, those two scammers have finally stopped running at a park, and one of them tells Ansho that they should just call it quits and go home because nothing good has happened since they came to this town. However, Ansho remains determined not to leave until he has scammed a fortune from these people, but as he says this, a rogue Kami realm opens nearby, and that definitely isn't a good sign for them. The next day, Harima comes to pay Minato a visit, and once he arrives at the door, he braces himself because he knows what he's going to have to deal with once he steps inside. As soon as Harima crosses the threshold, he feels immense pressure weighing down on him, but he does his best to stay standing despite it. Yamagami and the others are pretty impressed with Harima's resilience because they even applied more pressure than usual today, but he didn't fall over, and that's respect-worthy. Minato doesn't think it's nice of them to be messing with Harima like that, so he gets up to go help Harima inside, but he is surprised to see even Ho and Oryu joining in this time. A little while later, Harima is finally seated, and once he is feeling better, Minato asks him if the sealed talismans he gave him last time were helpful. Harima says the talismans were indeed very useful since they lasted a lot longer than usual, but there has been a bit of a problem lately. For some reason, the number of evil spirit appearances in town has seen a rapid increase, and it is too much for them to handle. So they've resorted to placing talismans all across town to keep the evil spirits away. Minato is shocked to hear all this, and he asks Harima if he has any idea what the cause of it could be, but Harima says he is still looking into it. That aside, he tells Minato that he brought these as gifts to thank him for all his help, but Minato is hesitant to accept this many gifts from him because he thinks it's a little excessive. Harima explains to him that these are all from his sisters and cousins, since they wanted to pay their respects to the Jade One, but Minato has no idea who this Jade One is supposed to be. Since Minato doesn't seem to know, Harima informs him that his talismans give off a jade light, which is why his family started calling him the Jade One. And Minato had no idea about the light since it isn't visible to his eyes. Minato thanks Harima for the gifts, and Harima is glad to hear it, but there's one more thing he wants to talk to Minato about. He asks if Minato happened to have two scummy exorcists break into his house recently, and Minato says he has no idea about any of that, but that's just because the minions never told him what happened. After filling Minato in on the details, Minato informs Harima that two exorcists did indeed show up, but they were apparently driven away before they could do much. Harima is glad to hear that, but he warns Minato to remain cautious because people like that are persistent, and they might show back up eventually. After that, Harima takes his leave, and Minato notices that Yamagami has a serious expression on his face, so he asks him what's wrong. Yamagami explains that he is a little concerned about what Harima said regarding evil spirits appearing in town because he can sense something wicked at work. Minato asks Yamagami what he means by that, but Yamagami can't really explain it. He just hopes it doesn't lead to a bigger problem down the road. All of a sudden, the pond begins to glow, and a second later, a man with a large 8-headed snake appears. Minato is frightened and wonders if this is the wicked thing Yamagami was talking about, but Yamagami doesn't seem bothered by their appearance, so this guy must not be evil. The guy mentions that his sister told him all about Minato, the man who has been receiving blessings from many gods, so he wanted to come see for himself, but he is disappointed because Minato seems like a weak wuss. Minato thinks for a second and figures out that the guy's sister must be Amaterasu, and that means he must be Susanoo. Susanoo really did just come here to meet Minato, but he does realize that the way he acted just now was quite rude, so he offers Minato a large bucket of sake as an apology gift. The others gather around the alcohol because they can't wait to have a taste, and so does Orochi, but Susanoo yells at Orochi and tells him to quit being so greedy because that alcohol isn't for him. Orochi doesn't take kindly to being yelled at, so the two start arguing, and Susanoo eventually threatens to chop off all of Orochi's heads before pulling out his sword and preparing to follow through on that threat. Minato tries to stop Susanoo by telling him that he doesn't want any bloodshed in his house, but Susanoo doesn't understand why Minato is so opposed to this since if Orochi's heads are cut off, a sword spawns from his tail, so it's pretty fun. Even so, Minato says he would rather not see that, but Susanoo doesn't believe him because what dude wouldn't want to see a sword come out of a snake's tail? He casually throws a slash at Minato, telling him to stop interrupting, but Minato blocks the slash with some wind magic. Susanoo is greatly impressed by Minato's use of wind magic, so he takes back what he said about Minato being weak, but he still thinks Minato is a wuss, though. Minato takes offense to being called a wuss, but Susanoo tells him he doesn't need to worry because he's going to train the wuss right out of him. Hearing him say that, Minato is both concerned and scared, so he tells Susanoo that he couldn't possibly ask a god to train him. But Susanoo refuses to take no for an answer and proceeds to drag Minato off into the sky before creating a portal that leads to his Kami realm. Yamagami is a little annoyed by how Susanoo just dragged Minato away like that, but Orochi tells him to cut Susanoo some slack since it has been ages since he last had a playmate to spend time with, so he's probably just a little too excited. In any case, he does think they should probably keep an eye on them just to make sure nothing goes wrong, so both Yamagami and Orochi fly through the portal Susanoo created and enter his Kami realm. Minato and Susanoo soon land in the Kami realm, and Susanoo wants to get right down to business and start fighting, but the thought of fighting him still really scares Minato. All of a sudden, he sees Yamagami and Orochi enter the Kami realm, and he assumes they must be here to stop Susanoo and take him back, so he is very relieved. But that relief soon vanishes when he sees them land on a cliff nearby with no intention of intervening. It looks like Minato is more or less on his own, so as Susanoo strikes at him, he uses wind to counter and then starts running away. Susanoo chases after him and starts throwing slash after slash, accidentally destroying a couple of houses in the process, and Minato tells him he is going way too far here. But Susanoo says a little collateral damage doesn't matter because he created this realm, and no one else lives here. He throws another slash at Minato, at which point he falls down, barely managing to dodge it, and he tells Susanoo that this is incredibly unfair because how is he supposed to fight back when Susanoo is the only one with a weapon? Susanoo admits that he's right and apologizes, but he says he was only going so hard because Minato kept using those wind powers in such a half-assed manner. On another note, he asks Minato why he doesn't have a weapon with him in the first place, and Minato explains that he has never owned a weapon, nor does he plan to because all he wants is to be able to protect himself and the people around him. Susanoo thinks it's funny that Minato believes that weak-ass breeze of his is enough to protect the people he cares about, and he reminds him that he is the first human Fujin has ever given his power to. So if he ends up being weak, it's going to make Fujin look bad. Minato is shocked to learn that he is the first person Fujin has ever given power to, so he asks Susanoo if it is really true, and Susanoo explains that he has been around for a very long time, and not once has he ever seen Fujin give out his power like he did with Minato. Minato had no idea about any of that, and he is starting to realize that maybe he does need to get stronger. But just then, Susanoo picks his sword back up and throws another slash at Minato, so it's back to running for him. While all that is going on in Susanoo's Kami realm, back in the real world, the two scam artist exorcists are busy walking through town, intentionally tearing down all the talismans that the Onmyoji set up around the place because they want more evil spirits to infest the town. After all, if evil spirits start showing up a lot in town, then people are going to start calling them for exorcisms, and in no time, they'll make a ton of money. Just then, they notice an evil spirit nearby get eaten by one of Katsuragi's Shikigami, and once they realize that Katsuragi is one of the Onmyoji, they immediately start running away because they know they'll be in trouble if he spots them. Katsuragi just barely manages to catch a glimpse of them as they are running away, and as he is wondering what they were up to, he suddenly notices the talisman that was ripped off the post. Harima soon catches up to Katsuragi, and Katsuragi points out the destroyed talisman, mentioning that he has seen several others like this today, and he is sure that those crook exorcists are behind this, so they've got to be stopped. Harima agrees that they need to stop the exorcists from tearing down the talismans that keep the evil spirits at bay, but talismans aside, they still don't know why the evil spirits are appearing in the first place. Just then, Harima and Katsuragi receive a report that evil spirits are spawning from a nearby parking lot because, for some reason, there's a ton of miasma collected there. And that sounds pretty serious, so the two of them rush over to handle it. Meanwhile, back on Minato's end, he is still stuck running from Susanoo while Susanoo launches slashes at him. But he eventually gets sick of Susanoo's constant taunting and hurls a wind slash at him in retaliation. Susanoo manages to block the slash, and he's glad Minato has finally decided to start fighting back, but he tells him he's going to have to try harder than that if he wants to win. Minato realizes that long-distance attacks aren't going to be of any use against Susanoo since he can read his attacks, so he needs to lure him in close if he wants to win the clash. Susanoo begins charging at Minato, and Minato just stands still because he's waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. At the last second before Susanoo's strike lands, Minato finally decides to make his move, unleashing a highly precise gust of wind that blocks Susanoo's strike and knocks him back with a lot of force. Susanoo is greatly impressed with Minato's performance, so he congratulates him on a job well done, and tells him they can call it a day for now. Minato is absolutely exhausted after using that much power at once, and Susanoo knows he called Minato's wind weak earlier, but that was by God's standards. So the fact that Minato is able to wield Fujin's wind to such an extent as a mortal is nothing short of extraordinary. He then helps Minato up, and after that he mentions that all this exercise has gotten him really hungry, so Minato ends up inviting him back to his place to have a meal. Susanoo is absolutely loving all the food, so he compliments Minato's cooking, but Minato says this is just the leftovers from last night's dinner, and it would have tasted even better if it were fresh. Susanoo mentions that he's glad Yamagami has someone like Minato around, and Minato asks what he means by that. So Susanoo explains that Yamagami has a tendency to overuse his power and end up small all the time when he's left alone, and with all the evil spirits popping up around town. He figured Minato could help Yamagami maintain order so he doesn't burn himself out. Minato doesn't mind the idea of helping Yamagami, and he asks Susanoo if that's the reason he chose to train him today, because if so, that was a really kind gesture, but Susanoo refuses to admit it. Instead, he asks Minato when he wants to schedule their next training session since he still has a long way to go, but before Minato can refuse or say anything else, Amaterasu shows up after hearing that her little brother met Minato today, and she scolds him for causing so much trouble for a mortal with his violence. She then drags him back home with her, and while all that was going on, the Onmyoji arrive at the site of the miasma, and to their horror, they see a gigantic portal in the sky, which is likely where all the evil spirits have been coming from, and even on the other side of the city, Yamagami can sense that something is wrong. Later on, as the group is on a shopping trip, Minato notices a bunch of stalls being set up, and he realizes it must be for an upcoming festival. Yamagami explains that the festival originally started as a way to offer gratitude for the mountain's blessings. In other words, it was originally a festival meant to celebrate Yamagami, but over time, people forgot what it was about. Though, that doesn't change the fact that the festival is still a whole lot of fun. Just then, Minato notices that the owner of Echigoye is here and is setting up a stall, and he, for one, hasn't forgotten the true reason for this festival. So he says he's going to make sure to offer some special buns to Yamagami later. Minato says Yamagami will surely be happy to receive them, but right now, he and his grandson still need to return home to prepare for the festival tomorrow, and they aren't the only ones. As Minato looks around the festival grounds, he can see countless people putting great effort into making sure this ends up being a success, and Yamagami feels honored to see how hard everyone is working for his festival. So much so that he ends up releasing some dazzling light and excitement, but Minato asks him to tone it down a little because it's really hard to see like this. He then asks Yamagami if there are any treats he would like to try because, After all, he's going to be the star of the festival tomorrow, so he should get to enjoy himself. Since Minato is insisting, Yamagami decides to take him up on the offer, and the two head out to get some food. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Tenko is sitting on top of her temple when she notices dark clouds converging nearby, and she knows this can't be good. As Minato and Yamagami are walking through town, they happen to notice a group of kids playing with some spinning tops. Yamagami is a little surprised since he thought spinning tops were only a New Year's toy, and normally, he'd be right, but it looks like this store allows kids to play with the tops left outside. After the kids are done, they put the spinning tops back in the basket and all leave to go home. But now that they are gone, Minato can clearly see Yamagami eyeing those tops, so he asks him if he would like to play, and Yamagami immediately says yes. Minato then heads over to the store and grabs a few tops for him and Yamagami to play with. Though, it has been a long time since Minato has used one of these, so he's not sure he'll be able to do it right. Minato then proceeds to wrap the string around the toy, and with one smooth pull, he manages to launch the spinning top directly onto the board. The minions praise Minato for such a successful toss, and now it's Yamagami's turn to try. But he's having a hard time wrapping the string around the top because he doesn't have any thumbs. Minato asks him if he's sure he can do it on his own, and Yamagami assures him that something like this is no trouble for him because even if he lacks thumbs, he can just use his spiritual power to wrap the string instead. Minato feels like that's kind of cheating, but that aside, he asks Yamagami how he plans to throw it like that, and Yamagami explains that it's actually pretty simple. All he needs to do is grab the string like this with his teeth, and then he can just let it rip. Unfortunately for Yamagami, he doesn't actually get much spinning action with his throw. Yamagami tries again several more times, but each time, it results in the same failure. After all those failed attempts, Yamagami tries to claim that his top is off balance, or that the board is uneven, which is why he was unable to land the top properly. But Minato doesn't think that's possible when the kids earlier were having no trouble playing. Instead, he just gives Yamagami some advice and tells him to try throwing the top with a little less force so it has a chance to gain rotation. And after Yamagami follows Minato's advice, he ends up landing the top perfectly, so they all cheer him on. And now that Yamagami knows how to land the top in the ring, he and Minato can finally start playing. They both get ready and toss their tops into the ring, and at first, there's no contact, so Minato decides to kick things off by giving his top a little nudge toward Yamagami's. The two tops collide, and Minato asks Yamagami how he plans to strike back. But Yamagami says there will be no need for him to retaliate because the key to victory in a game like this is to remain unmovable like a mountain. Since Yamagami isn't going to do anything, Minato decides to take another jab at his top, launching his toward Yamagami's yet again, and after they collide, both tops begin losing rotational speed very quickly. In the end, however, Minato's top ends up stopping just before Yamagami's does, so Yamagami is declared the winner of their match. Elsewhere in the city, Harima and the rest of the Onmyoji are patrolling through the streets when they notice that yet another talisman has been torn down from its post. They believe those scam exorcists are the ones behind it, but they haven't been able to find any traces of the two. And furthermore, they still don't know what that massive cloud of darkness they saw last time was. There's a possibility that those exorcists might be behind that as well, but there's no way they'll know until they find those guys and make them talk. Just then, Horikawa comes running up to the others and informs them that she just got an anonymous tip about something happening in the area. There's no real way to confirm if the tip is credible or not, but the location is at a house just a little further up the street, so they should probably go check it out regardless. At the same time, Minato and the others have just finished their shopping, so it's about time for them to head home. But all of a sudden, Minato notices a man who looks a lot like the guest he had at his family's inn in the story he told a while ago. He tries to go after the man to confirm whether it really is him or not, but after turning down the alleyway, he completely loses sight of him. Yamagami and the others ask Minato what he was in such a hurry over, and he explains the whole situation to them. Yamagami tells him that the man was likely a traveling exorcist, and it's possible that he may have come to this town after sensing that something was going on here. Just then, Minato receives a message from the wind spirits telling him that he should be careful because danger is coming, and Minato isn't really sure what they were talking about. But Yamagami believes it has something to do with the wicked darkness he has been sensing for a while now. Minato recalls hearing Yamagami mention that before, so he asks him what exactly it means, but before Yamagami can explain anything, Raijin and Fujin suddenly show up. Minato is surprised to see them all the way out in town like this, so he asks what happened, and they explain that there's a bit of a problem brewing, so they came to warn everyone. Apparently, a portal to a bizarre Kami realm opened up out of nowhere, and evil spirits have been pouring out of it non-stop. None of them have ever heard of a kami realm that produces evil spirits before. But one thing is for sure, there must be an extremely potent power at the center of that kami realm for it to be so powerful. On the other side of the city, those two scam exorcists are busy celebrating because they just got another exorcism gig thanks to all the evil spirits that have been afflicting the town recently. But all of a sudden, they are surrounded by Haruma and his crew, and he demands to know how they did all this. The two scam artists are terrified and immediately apologize for tearing down the talismans, but that's not what Haruma is interested in right now. He wants to know how they are controlling that dark mass and how to stop it from creating evil spirits. However, the two tell him they don't know anything about it. Haruma and the others don't believe them, and they are prepared to do whatever is necessary to get them to talk, but the two begin begging and swear that they don't know anything about the cloud. They just happened to stumble across it earlier and thought that they'd be able to use the fact that it's spitting out evil spirits to make money from exorcist gigs, which is why they tore down all those talismans. But they have no actual control over the darkness itself. The others still find it hard to believe these scam artists, but Horikawa can tell that these two are too scared right now to lie, so they genuinely don't know anything about the evil spirits. Just then, Harima senses something wrong, so he runs off and leaves the others in charge of taking care of the two. At the same time, Minato and Yamagami see the rogue kami realm approach their area. Harima soon arrives on the scene as well, and with the kami realm spitting out evil spirits like that, the people all over town are beginning to feel the severe effects of it. They can't let this go on much longer, so Yamagami takes a good look at the kami realm to analyze it, and he realizes that there's a giant evil spirit in there. It's a spirit that holds a lot of unjust resentment, which is fueling its negative energy, and it is too much for normal people to handle. So Yamagami tells Minato to step back so he can take care of this. Yamagami then hops up onto one of the roofs and lets out a large wave of his divine power to close the kami realm portal, but even though the portal is gone now, he warns everyone not to let their guards down because there are still a lot of evil spirits left over to deal with. All of a sudden, all those evil spirits begin charging right at the group, and the minions jump forward in an attempt to protect everyone, but they severely underestimated just how potent the impurities were, so they get overwhelmed in no time and are left unable to move. Minato quickly draws a talisman to protect everyone in the meantime, but he's not going to be able to make a talisman powerful enough to get rid of all these evil spirits without his special brush at home. So Minato asked Harima to hold down the fort while he heads home to create a talisman strong enough to get rid of all these things. At the same time, the others notice the large wave of evil spirits that just descended on the city, and they are so distracted by it that they end up taking their eyes off the two scam artists, who immediately seize the opportunity to make a run for it. Seishiro wants to chase after them to make them pay for all the trouble they've caused in town, but Horikawa tells him it's not worth it because, right now, their top priority should be taking care of that massive horde. Minato and the others have finally made it back home, and after setting the minions down, Minato asks them if they are alright, but they have been extremely weakened due to all the impurities they were exposed to earlier. Minato realizes he needs to hurry up and make a talisman to get rid of those evil spirits if he wants to help the minions recover, so he decides to get to work immediately. However, a few moments later, Minato hears Ho yelling outside about something big, so he heads outside to check it out, and to his shock, he sees that the abandoned Kami Realm portal has returned. He doesn't understand how this could have happened since he is sure he saw Yamagami close it before, but Yamagami explains that there is still an evil spirit in there, so it likely just reopened the portal. He says the evil spirit's resentment came from its faith in the Kami being betrayed, so it is now taking its anger out on Yamagami's mountain, and at this rate, all the animals there are going to fall victim as well. Before long, the animals from the mountain all begin to migrate toward Minato's garden for shelter from the evil spirits, but things only get worse from there because Yamagami suddenly becomes transparent. The same is happening with the minions as well, and Minato is extremely worried, so he asks Yamagami if this has something to do with the mountain being defiled. Yamagami confirms this, but he also mentions that since his power comes from people's respect for the mountain, when his link to the people is cut off by impurities, it becomes difficult for him to maintain his physical form. So Minato really needs to find a way to stop that thing soon, otherwise, the others might disappear. He begins working as fast as he can, but just when he's about done with the talismans, the Kami realm begins moving back toward the town, so Minato rushes off to go stop it. Meanwhile, over in town, Harima's sisters soon arrive as backup to help fight off the evil spirits, and they were making decent progress, but then the portal returned and even more evil spirits flooded in, so the situation was looking pretty hopeless. At the last second, however, Minato finally arrived with his talismans. A group of evil spirits attack Minato, and he uses his talismans to defend himself. But unfortunately, while he is doing that, the talismans end up getting blown away in the wind, leaving him completely defenseless against the next wave of evil spirits. The evil spirits are about to overwhelm Minato, but at the last second, Yamagami jumps in to protect him, almost completely draining what was left of his energy and returning to his tiny form. With the current state of the mountain and all the people, Yamagami is weaker than ever before, and as a result of the exertion from protecting Minato, Yamagami begins vanishing as well.